2021. The plan is to keep the conversation lively, and our hope is that everyone is able to walk away with a few useful insights, from all these great brands. And finally, I just want to say thank you to our team at Quantcast and this opportunity to be here with you today. So without further ado, let's kick things off. Today, for our first session, we'll be joined by a 40 under 40 winner, Brad Blons, who's the Vice President, Global Head of Brand Creative and Design for MetLife, and his moderator, Annalisa Gooden, CEO from Catch and Release. Welcome to the stage, and looking forward to hearing from Brad and Annalisa today.
Awesome. Thank you, Martin.
Thanks, Martin.
Hi, Brad.
Hi, Annalisa.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's nice to see you again.
You too.
Yeah, I didn't. You and I have met before, and the piece behind you was not lit up last time we chatted.
Yeah, I did that for the talk today. This is a neon sign of a duck drinking a martini.
Great. What's the significance? Tell us the story.
You know what? I live in Brooklyn, and a restaurant nearby our apartment. This is before COVID had shut down, and we were friendly with the owners. And when they were packing up, I kind of commented on the sign, and they said, "You just take it." So it's awesome. It's been sitting in a storage room for a while, but I finally put it up. It's become a sort of conversation piece.
I have a sort of a similar story that's about like the one that got away. So my first job in high school was in an ice cream shop, and they had a neon sign in the thing, and then they closed down several years later, and I missed my opportunity to grab the sign. And I always think about it. I'm like, I would have loved to have a neon sign from that place. So I'm glad you got yours. I'll just vicariously live through your duck.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for taking the time to chat today. I'm really excited to kind of continue our conversation and let others kind of get to listen in on it. I thought we would maybe start with your background in the arts. So you got your MFA in design from Yale, and did a thesis there on undoing. I thought maybe you could kind of give us an overview of that, because I think that leads to a lot of really interesting sort of connections to where we are today as an industry and our own undoing and redoing. So I'd love to hear how you interpret that. Like, what was that project? Tell us about it.
Yeah, I mean, that thesis, I'm going back a long time in my brain, but it was really about the idea of deconstruction, and that thesis really was meant to drive all the work we were doing in that program. So it was kind of like a year-long investigation into this idea of deconstruction or undoing. And, it was really about trying to understand how things work. Whether you're confronted with a problem or an idea or a concept, kind of taking the engine apart to understand how all the pieces work, kind of allows you to, see things in different ways, and then kind of build it back the way, you'd envision it, or you think would work better. I think in through the lens of a graduate program, when you're a young student, experimentation is a lot, easier to make a part of your practice. I think during that time in my life, I was just kind of wanting to explore everything, and failing most of the time, and when something worked, kind of putting that away in the mental file cabinet for something in the future.
So how do you think about that now? Because we've sort of all been forced to do that with COVID, and having to change our practices, change our process, change the way we creatively output. How has that been? I mean, have there been muscles that we're now, are we in that phase of experimentation now? have you found that even a company like MetLife, which is large and established, have they been able to, have you been able to embrace that spirit of experimentation as a result of COVID?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually I still struggle with the idea of creating um it, creative spaces in a COVID world. When I actually joined MetLife, we've always had a culture of remote uh, remote employees and working offsite, and that was actually really hard for me when I first joined because I came from the agency world where you're in one room or office together, and you're kind of there's this sort of kinetic energy that's bouncing off the walls. And I think what I tried to do at MetLife before COVID was to recreate that spirit in a very corporate setting. Um, I think since since COVID, we've had to do everything remotely, and we've had to adapt that way. It is, I think it is very difficult. You lose a lot of things through the Zoom call. I mean, even sitting right here right now. I mean, normally we'd be with a group of people. I can't see that group of people. I can't feed off the energy, and I think
Mhm.
um, that's a lot of what creativity is kind of seeing something, feeling something, and reacting to it. So we try our best. I think we've done a lot of Zoom brainstorm sessions. We've incorporated new tools like Miro, which is sort of like an online collaboration tool. Um, things that pre-COVID employees like didn't really want to adopt that much,
Yeah.
but now that we're kind of forced to, they've played a larger role.
So those are some of the challenges I absolutely can see. What are some of the sort of opportunities or the silver linings, the unexpected benefits that you've noticed?
Yeah, I mean, I've actually seen our culture grow during COVID in many ways. I think um, even though we're not in the same room together physically, all the stress and emotions of 2020, created a new layer of transparency within our teams, and people
Mhm.
became much more open to talk about what they were going through. Um, and I saw that as definitely like a silver lining when you think about I mean, culture in a corporate environment is hard to create or replicate. And at MetLife, we tend to have the type of culture where when you're in the office, you're working really hard from 9 to 5, but at when that clock hits 5, people are going home to be with their family or their friends or their loved ones. um you know so it was harder to build that culture. It often felt forced. But I would say just the collective experience of going through what we all went through and continue to go through during COVID has opened up people's personalities. Um,
And does that have any impact on the creative process at all? Do you get any benefits from that alone?
I think yeah, I think so. I mean, when people open up and they share their vulnerabilities, they share what they're going through. It makes people more willing to share their ideas. I find there's often, especially, if you're in a very hierarchical environment, people are nervous to share their ideas.
Mhm.
There's a sense of, well, is it my turn? Am I speaking out of turn? Am I sharing too much? So I think with some of these barriers that have come down, and people getting a glimpse into our personal lives,
Mhm.
our children running in on screen, having to say, time out, I got something going on in the other room I got to take care of. um
Mhm.
I think has allowed creativity to flourish in a way that feels much more comfortable and inviting.
That's really so great. And I wonder if, I mean, what that makes me feel is incredibly hopeful for some sort of amazing renaissance when we're all going back to being in person, because we're going to have this foundation of trust and vulnerability. Like from that foundation, imagine what we can do. One of the things I thought was super interesting about your transition into MetLife that you shared with me when we first met, was this kind of listening tour you went on around the world to understand the different markets that MetLife was in, understand the people, understand the demographics, understand really the nuances culturally of a lot of different places before starting to create content and experiences that were meant to, connect with those people. And I can't help but wonder, how do you do that? How do you approach the problem of global localization when you can't physically go there? Like, what is this? Because I think even this is a post-COVID question. I mean, a lot of these tools of Zoom calls have made this kind of work very accessible. We can kind of easily meet people. We can easily jump in. We can hire people from wherever we want now. It's kind of created a lot of opportunity that I think is going to be longstanding. So how do you think about social listening in a partially virtual sort of workflow?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it actually, that particular scenario um, impacted me right in the middle of one of our major programs, which essentially for 2 years before COVID happened, my job was to travel to our key markets around the globe and understand our business and customers in those markets, and then you know in terms of our brand expression, how we activated in those markets were meant to evolve based on the customer needs in those markets. So a lot of my time was spent in Japan, Korea, Mexico, and the U.S. as well. Really focusing on how we could connect with our customers there, and a lot of those in-person engagements involved, well, not only visiting those locations multiple times, but also, you know, experiencing the culture. Visiting the museums, the restaurants,
Mhm. Yeah.
the art galleries, the neighborhoods, and interacting with the people to truly understand them. During COVID, we we had already planned and budgeted to do a similar engagement in China. And so we were supposed to head out there in, I think, January or February of 2020. And it quickly, before COVID hit the US, it kind of, there was this period of, are we going to go? Or are we not going to go? Is it safe to go? Ultimately, we decided not to go. And we pushed that project until about April or May of 2020, where we shifted to do it 100% remote. And that was that was a very big. I was terrified. I would say in terms of am I going to be able to replicate what we had done in our other key markets in person over Zoom calls? And what I found was that we were able to do that. We had to make a lot of adjustments. One, the time difference, right? You know,
Mhm.
that in and of itself made things very difficult logistically to interact with the local team. We had to do a lot of late night calls, a lot of early morning calls, so that we could kind of share in that burden. Um, but what we also ended up doing is relying heavily on kind of what we're doing right now. We enlisted a number of local experts, people who had written books about Chinese culture, curators, in Beijing, designers, um, tech entrepreneurs, and we would have these sorts of discussions, and we would just pick their brains and ask questions and take notes, and we actually were able to get the information we needed to localize there. I would say it was definitely not as fun. Um, going to a country, and spending a week there or a couple weeks and really experiencing in person, there's no substitute for that. But we were able to do the work. So I wonder now if I'll ever be able to travel, to a distant country in the near future, given that we were able to do just as good, able to succeed in the work without actually having to fly there.
Yeah, I can definitely appreciate that. And there's a lot of parts of kind of building programs, building companies, building platforms that, we're seeing the benefits of a global connectedness in this, right? Everybody's in it together. It's not like it's just happening to you and everyone else is doing things normally. It's by nature, it's a global issue. And I think there's also it's kind of cool that you were able to probably those curators and those designers, you're meeting them in their homes, I imagine, and
Right.
for the most part. And so there's that's kind of interesting as well. You wouldn't normally probably be invited into their house. You'd be meeting them, at an office or whatever. I do wonder what your thoughts are on the long-term impacts. So the short term, we're sort of like, wow, we're really making the best of this. We're really, there's some challenges, but there's also awesome silver linings. Like we're really making the best of this now. What about in 5 years? What about in 10 years? What are the impacts of this period downstream in your view?
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to tell. I mean, I definitely feel like, it's kind of cliche to say at this point, but the way we work has changed, and I feel like it will be this way for a long time. I can't imagine, going back anytime soon to a regular 9 to 5 in the office type of cadence. I do think that we will have a lot more flexibility in that sense. So I think that, in a general sense, I think, you know, I I feel pretty strongly that will continue. Um, I think from a work from the actual, like, the work we're producing, um, pre-COVID versus post-COVID. I mean, MetLife is a 153-year-old company. Um, when I joined, we were in the midst of a major brand transformation, and digital transformation.
Mhm.
Um, but I think where we are clearly headed right now is head on into a digital transformation and doubling down on that.
Yeah.
So the way our business works, I mean, I was shocked to learn when I first joined MetLife that I think, and this was in 2017, that I think around 70% of our business transactions were still done on paper. And I think what we are, and so 2018, 2019, 2020, I mean, everyone was talking about digital transformation, but the pace of that was quite slow. What I'm seeing now is like a very true acceleration of that way of working and that way of doing business. Um, Agents who sell insurance, you don't so much of what the sort of ethos at MetLife was about the face-to-face interaction that an agent has with the customer, and how valuable that is. And I think I think we'll always, that face-to-face connection will always be important. But I think just as equally, as important, and what I'm seeing changing is that digital transaction and connection is rapidly being adopted right now.
That's great. I think that's great because I think human interaction is critical. I mean, we are social beings. It's absolutely critical. Would I rather be in the room with you right now? 100%. But there are some things that are uniquely qualified for in person, and there's some things that don't need to necessarily be. So signing a piece of paper doesn't have to be an in-person experience.
Yes.
You don't necessarily lose much there. But having a team offsite or getting to travel to another locale to understand the culture and take in all the things that you can take in, that seems like a uniquely human experience. So I think it's giving us the opportunity, maybe what I'm hearing from you is it's giving us the opportunity to focus where that human value is and where do we really not need humans in the loop as much. So what do you think is going to stick? I mean, even just in the next 24 months, what do you think becomes sort of part of this digital transformation for MetLife beyond just processes?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more on that point. I mean, I did so many things virtually last year that I would have just loathed to have to do in person. Like I refinanced my mortgage. I redid my will with my wife. Those sorts of things. Like, before I would have to go to, my agent's office and sign papers, and it just seems so antiquated and unnecessary. We redid our will last week, and our attorney was on a Zoom, and she watched us sign all the papers, and we just, we put them in the mail, and they're with her, and that was done. I didn't have to like take an afternoon off of work to go do that.
100%. Great example.
Yeah. I mean, I think those types of transactions, will more increasingly find themselves in the digital space.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the physical ones will be more, more about social, more emotional. More about relationship building, and earning trust with our customers. So I do see that, when things go back to normal, and we're able to be more in person, I do think that trust you build in person, not only with an agent, but with the brand too, like how your brand shows up in a physical environment will continue to be important and build that relationship. I think for the more transactional moments, I think you still want those moments to be simple, seamless, and your brand needs to show up in that way in those environments as well. But yeah, that's kind of what I see happening, at least in insurance.
Right. And you guys sell through, you sell through two channels, right? One is the B2B, which are
Mhm.
the brokers and that, and then the B2C is the products. Once someone has chosen MetLife, then they enter the world of MetLife, and then that becomes more of a product experience. Any differences in how you sell to B2B versus B2C in those two environments?
Yeah, I mean, it MetLife is interesting because, and you know, I learn more and more about the actual business of insurance every day. I'm still by no means an expert, even though working there 3 years. But to give you an example of how different it is, you know, in the U.S., we mostly focus on B2B, and that transaction happens mostly through employers.
Mhm.
So you're selling the insurance to the employers, who then, when they bring on, you know, if you're a new employee and you're
Mhm.
signing up for your benefits, MetLife is a choice you might make. Sometimes it might be the only choice or one of two choices, but you're still making that choice. In Mexico, for example, which is one of our key markets, it is a very personal exchange. We have there what's called worksite marketing. And essentially what it is the government has contracts with, I'm sorry, the MetLife has contracts with government institutions like um, police stations, fire stations, you know, different bureaucratic institutions, and agents are granted access into those institutions, and they literally walk the halls with a clipboard, um, and ask people if they'd like to sign up for insurance. I mean, and the agents there are so good at what they do. They've been doing it for so long. We went on a, a on a field visit with two agents, and I watched a veteran sales agent sell insurance to a policewoman on the street who was outside of the building in 2 minutes. And you know, he did it old school. He had a clipboard with forms. He went through his talking points. She bought it and she signed right there on the dotted line in 2 minutes, literally. So I think what we're gonna see there is, you know, what we've already started doing for those agents is providing them the brand assets and digital
Mhm.
tools that
Mhm.
they are gonna need, that to one, replace that clipboard, and two, be able to engage with that customer post sale. Um,
Yeah.
so you know, that can be anything from um, you know, a follow up email, you know, or a birthday wish on their birthday, you know, happy birthday, just thinking of you, you know,
Mhm.
offering new products, that sort of thing. Um, you know, to, you know, I mean, I watched another scenario where the same agent was trying to sell insurance to a gentleman, and at halfway through, he said, "You know what? I have to talk to my wife about this." And so they exchanged information. He said, "I'd follow up with you later." So giving them the tools to, um, you know, personalize those experiences with those customers in a digital way after they've made that face-to-face contact, I think is something we'll be focusing on more.
That is really, really interesting. That's really beautiful. I mean, when you talk about digital transformation, you're not talking about bull in a china shop, come in and just change everything. You're talking about really starting from the origin of how it's currently working and how do we meet people where they are and give them more tools to do what they're already doing better. I mean, what they really want to do is make the connection with the person, start that relationship and earn their business, right? How do we, you're basically described a scenario where digital tools and other kinds of experiences that can't be done on paper
Yeah,
might embellish that or make that stronger. That's really cool. I like
yeah.
that description. My children are screaming in the background, so I apologize in advance.
Totally get it.
Safe space, right, Brad?
Yeah.
So we're going to kind of move into, I've got one last question. I think we're going to then move to audience some Q&A. We've got some folks that are really curious to ask you a couple of questions themselves. So we've talked a bit about the immediate term. We've talked about the long term. Tell us about your prediction just for 2021. What's 2021 going to bring you? What's going to bring us? What do we need to be prepared for this year?
Oh man. I mean, I think a lot of, I mean, for me personally, I think, you know, like what we talked about, I think we're going to be even more accelerated into that digital space in a bigger way. I think, you know, what I'm seeing, you know, internally with my colleagues is again, like a more flexibility in the ways that we work, an openness to the way that we work, a trust that's being built around, you know, hey, like we're all going through this together. And you know, I mean, the way I manage my team is kind of like, hey, let's, you know, as long as you're getting the work done and we're raising the bar there, like, you know, you live your life how you need to. And so I you know, I see also a really big focus, you know, on diversity, equity, and inclusion happening with my colleagues. That has accelerated into, you know, topic of conversation and how we, you know, not only align ourselves within our teams, but the work that we produce, you know, has to address a much wider audience. It has to be, you know, aware of how the world is moving and shifting, and so I see that, you know, becoming a part of what we do. Sustainability is another a topic that we talk about at work a lot too, and the work that we do, you know, is impacting the world in a positive way. And so I hope to see those trends continue. You know, that they're not just sort of binary goals. You know, let you know, to be more inclusive and to help the world. I think that is how you build, you know, responding to those movements in the world is a brand response, you know. And I think I hope to see more of that in 2021.
I think coming back to your initial interest in your thesis on undoing and deconstructing and rebuilding, in this case, isn't just about wanting to try lots of different things and experiment. It's also giving yourself space and tools to recontextualize based on what's happening around you, right? So if you can break it down and you reevaluate, how should it be rebuilt given the time that we're living in, given the context that we're living in, given the opportunities that we have. It puts you in a constant state of agility and flexibility, which I think, you know, I'm hearing you say is a skill we're going to all need for this year, is to kind of remain flexible.
Yeah.
Well, we have a couple questions. I thought I'd pull these up and see if you'd like to take a stab at any of these. So the first one is, how has your creative process changed over the past year? Did it used to be more collaborative as a team, or did you find ways to replace that in-person brainstorming? You mentioned a couple of tools that you use to do that. Tell us more.
Yeah, we use a Miro, M-I-R-O, a lot, and it's basically like a big whiteboard, sort of interactive collaborative tool that at first I was, you know, a little skeptical to be using, but now that we've all been doing it, it's really helped. You know, we like to. I come from a school of pinning stuff up on the wall on walls. So a big practice of what I introduced at MetLife was not presenting decks, but presenting big boards,
Boards,
so
yeah.
that executives, you can stand back and look at a big wall and really take it in and talk about everything at once. Using the online tools has definitely helped, and we're able to have those collaborative sessions. Haven't really figured out how to present in that way yet. The presentations have lost some of that that sort of grandiosity, that big moment. But so we're working on that. I would say personally, I've actually become, I've been able to practice my own creativity, I think, more working from home. Even sitting at my desk and, in between calls, sometimes I'll have an idea or a thought, and, I can just kind of focus on that here, without the distractions of the office, which has been nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Marty, how are we doing on time?
We're ready.
All right.
Guys, thanks so much for a great session. Honestly, really loved it. Thought there were some great takeaways. I think, Brad, you touched on it, and Annalisa a little bit, both by your children in the background, but how much I think, we really are inviting everybody into our homes these days, which really does make for that bonding experience that I don't think that you get in that office environment. You talked about coming together, being able to see people, but I think this is like that, the opposite of that. I mean, here you've got, we would never know you had a duck drinking a martini on your wall. And Annalisa, I am just amazed at that stack of books behind you and how that has not fallen over, especially with little kids in the house. Are they glued? What,
There's a shelf in there.
Okay, I'm stressed out by it. I'm stressed out by it. But anyway, no, I thought it was a great session, and just a couple of notes. I mean, I think Brad, talking about the digital transformation that's happened and how the pandemic has just really accelerated that. I mean, even to the point of putting, some electronic devices into folks that are out in the streets. It reminds me of Groundhog Day when the guy is going up to someone on the street and trying to sell insurance to Bill Murray. So,
yeah.
Anyway, great session, guys. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to, of course, absolutely. We're going to head on to our next speakers. So we've got Tim Brunel, Director of Content and Production from Land O'Lakes, and Nick Fuller, who is the SVP Growth at Media Monks, who are Media Monks, apologies, who are going to join us on stage. Welcome, Tim and Nick.
Hey,
Howdy.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, Martin. I really appreciate the intro. And Tim, good to see you.
Nick, again, great to see you.
Yeah, I think, Tim, if you allow me to do the honors on the intro, as your illustrious moderator for this session. We just had a fantastic pre-call together and getting to know each other quickly around the topic of Tim's incredible career and his trajectory within just overall, and how he sees creativity and innovation coming together and creating a real culture for that. And I think we've got some great stuff to chat on. So to my friends at Brand Innovators, if at any point we go over or whatever, feel free to ping me or let me know. We want to make sure we have a lot of time for Q&A. As mentioned, I'm the SVP of Growth for Media Monks. We're a global production company, part of S4 Capital, which is a holding company that is about, just a few years old now, and already we're approaching, I think, 4,000 employees globally. So we're a high growth company these days. But I'll stop talking because who we're really here to see is Tim Brunel. And Tim, nice to chat with you today.
Indeed, thank you. Maybe a quick background. If you want to know about me, you can Google. There's plenty of information there. But I think that I always like to start with Land O'Lakes, my employer. Been there for 2 years. And my guess is that pretty much most people would say, oh, Land O'Lakes, right? They make butter. And the conversation kind of ends there. And the fact is that we are a lot more than just a butter company. Though this is 2021 is our 100th year. We as a company are 100 years old. we're farmer owned. We all report to farmers. So Land O'Lakes is a cooperative, if you didn't know that. And our mission, our vision is feeding human progress. And that works across 4 different business models. So kind of quickly, the dairy side that everyone's aware of, cheese, butter, etc. And that's both to consumers and also to food service, so colleges and universities and restaurants. But then we also have ag technology. So there's the Winfield United side of it. So think about seeds that farmers use to plant crops, right? Or most importantly, the inputs and the management that occurs during the growing season to optimize the yield of those plants. That's a huge area for us. And it's everything from drones to satellites to all kinds of crazy science and wind tunnels, et cetera, et cetera. And then we have Purina Animal Nutrition, which is feed. So if you have a horse or a cow or goats, or we'll talk about chickens, we probably are the feed that you're using. We're responsible for feeding pretty much every zoo animal in the United States. And then last but not least, Truterra is our sustainability division that is, again, software-based service model that is helping ensure that sustainability is starting with farmers and helping farmers sustain, which ultimately helps communities in the world be more sustainable. So I feel very fortunate because I get to work across all of that, get to work with our CMO and work with all of the different business units and help facilitate content and production, sometimes just internally with our own resources, and then oftentimes with our agency partners who are very valuable to the conversation.
Tim, that's an awesome background. And I want to back you up even further, going all the way back to just how you grew up and talking a little bit about your background in terms of being part of an artistic family and what that did for you in terms of you as a fantastic marketer. And you described a key muscle of being curiosity, which I thought was just an incredible insight. So if you want to give everyone just a quick intro as to how you got into this and what that background has done for you.
Yeah, so my dad was the director of Minnesota Opera music director for a number of years. He was the youngest player in the Minnesota Orchestra at like 19, church organist, an amazing human being in terms of music, classical music and choir and choral singing and stuff like that. We actually, we have a little video series that we've been working on together since the pandemic hit, where he talks in every episode about a different composer. And we're nearing 200 composers that we've done episodes on. So that's been a lot of fun. That you can find that on YouTube. My mom's a painter and a florist. And so I grew up in a household with interesting people, colorful people, singers and artists and things like that. And went out to school, got a degree in jazz because that makes all kinds of sense. And then wound up working in advertising. And I think that the improvisation courses that I took in school, the University of Cincinnati, sure, it was about chords and scales and patterns and things like that. But really, philosophically, it taught me about the systems that are involved in improvisation, which are intrinsically linked to entrepreneurialism, right? So if you think about a business environment, and I thrive in chaotic environments, so, situations change. It's sort of like, well, we just went from a swing to a mambo rhythm, or we just changed keys. The bass player decided we're going over here. And so learning to have muscle memory that allows you to go, oh, okay, we're in B flat now. Fine. Do you want to approach it this way, or this way? Or, oh, we're going to play a mambo. Well, there's a couple of ways we could play that mambo, A, B, or C. So improvisation and those kinds of skills I found were very useful. They applied themselves to advertising. Being a copywriter, being a creative director, it's like you're constantly pivoting and shifting and adjusting to inputs. And now working kind of in-house at Land O'Lakes, a lot of the same things hold true.
Awesome. Yeah, Tim, I think it's that agile way of working and always being curious and spotting opportunity and, winning over teams of people. I mean, it just seems to be kind of one of those, it's in the DNA of CMOs that I've talked to, and I'm sure that's kind of running the key theme among big companies, is you got to be able to reach across aisles and get people excited about specific new opportunities, get them out of their comfort
Right.
zone and stretch them. And one area that I think, just because I'm going straight into the topic that we want to talk about,
Right.
is around what you guys have done in terms of thinking small and agile with
Right.
that startup, really effectively a startup within Land O'Lakes, which was the
Right.
Hen
Right.
direct-to-consumer brand. And walk us through that a bit, because was this completely foreign as a notion? Where did the business opportunity come from? How did you approach it? And how did you
Sure.
build a brand and a business around it? Because that's must have been immensely interesting inside of a big company.
So I'll start with we have a new CMO. Her name is Heather Malinchek. She's amazing, and she's a rock and roll singer. So musicians, right? Maybe someday we'll put an in-house band together. Huh. But yeah, so there's a brand called Hen Up, HENUP, henuporganics.com. You can find it wherever you want to buy backyard chicken feed. So I mentioned Purina, one of our business units. And in that portfolio, poultry, feeding chickens is a big part of it. But let's also recognize that there are lots of Americans who've decided, hey, I'd like to have chickens in my backyard. I've got a neighbor who's got 12, another neighbor that's got about 80. So there are, backyard chicken flock people out there. And that, when you look at it from a business standpoint, that area of the world of our portfolio is growing. And I think COVID in some ways actually amplified some of that. You and I were joking, we talked about the idea of chickens as a service, CAAS. Someone else can coin that, please. But so one of my neighbors wanted to try out, let's have backyard chickens, but felt like, well, I mean, it's a commitment. And there is a company here in Minnesota that they'll come and give you the coop, and you want 2, 3, 4 chickens, and essentially rent them to you, and then you have them for as long as you want to have them. And when you're done, they come and get the chickens in the coop and go away. So there are people out there offering chickens as a service. So that was the business scenario, that, hey, there is an increasing appetite or interest in having backyard chickens. Yes, we have brands of feed that address that. They're primarily at Tractor Supply Company and other physical retail. Second business factor is looking at the digital shelf. So Amazon specifically, if you do an analysis of the digital shelf, you go, boy, there's not a lot of feed, or it's essentially just cloned over from retail. And so it sparked the question, is there an opportunity to create a digital first backyard chicken flock brand? And essentially it's the age old question, should we disrupt ourselves at Purina before someone else does? And that was really the business case motivation, was to say, like, all right, how can we look at all the factors happening in digital, look at the rise in the consumer segment, and create a brand that, what can we learn from it that might enable our other portfolio of products? So that was the business case. New product, typical, I'm sure this is true of a lot of large corporations. Land O'Lakes, this could have taken a year, right? It would have been a lot of stage gates, brought in external partners, done a lot of analysis. And there's nothing wrong with that approach. It is an approach, but it has costs, right? And one of those costs is it takes a long time and maybe costs a lot. So at the beginning of this process, one of the things that I think it was important was that we said speed is paramount. We have to be really fast. And we deliberately have to be agile. That, of course, causes the teams to have to think differently than they had. So it's about communicating outward to usually we have 800 people in the meeting, right? to let everybody know, this time there's only going to be 12, right? So the communicating out of what's happening was sort of essential. But the mandate was move quickly. And so in this particular case, something that might have taken over a year took a lot less than half that time. And so if you kind of follow, let's take Julian Cole's kind of brand planning sort of structure as an example. We had defined the opportunity that marketing could address. We had discerned an actionable audience insight around this audience. When we talked to them, it's like they were like they're buying everything else online. They're like, well, where's the chicken feed online? And there really wasn't a whole lot there. So we're going to meet you there. That's the audience insight. And then we went through a process. We worked with a couple of great freelancers, developed an initial list of 100 names, 120 names, quickly narrow it down to like, okay, there's half of these or more are just we legally can't do or whatever. Spin those down to a core 12 ideas that, all right, legally we could, and they seem to, do SEO analysis on them, et cetera. Then you get feedback from leadership. And then at that point, it's like, okay, we've narrowed it down to 4 or 5. Let's start thinking about design. Let's start looking at color and shape and all that good stuff. Worked with a fabulous freelance designer on this, and ultimately narrowed it down to 2 or 3 directions. Did some testing quickly, got a choice on one. And then the important thing is that same team that went through that process, in a lot of cases, you would hand this off. And now a whole new team comes in. Now, in this case, we kept the same design team through production. And they worked with our resources. But I think that synergy of having the same team that went from the beginning all the way to the end was really useful in terms of maintaining a consistency of things. And then that same team was creating social assets, creating website assets. So that it was deliberate to say it's going to be a small team. It was deliberate to say it was going to be fast. And that's how we launched HenUp. And I felt like it's been a great example for all of us inside Land O'Lakes about how we can operate if we choose that's the way we want to operate.
Cool. And Tim, why did you work with freelancers on this rather than send a really awesome brief to a company like Media Monks, for example?
I know, exactly. We clearly need to be sending more of our briefs to Media Monks. Yeah, or any of our agency partners. And we've got wonderful agency partners, and they're absolutely the right solution in a lot of cases. Part of it had to do with one of the constraints was overall budget. And when you look at it and say, well, we have a set amount of money, and if we go with an external partner, there's going to be costs, right? Overhead with that partner versus, well, what if we source the creative stuff ourselves, right? So again, that was part of it, was to say, you've got the constraint of budget, you got the constraint of time, and that causes the decisions to be what they are.
Awesome. Yeah.
But we'll call you guys next time, please. Yeah.
Please do. That sounds like a killer brief. The creative looked beautiful. The package design is gorgeous. To anyone on the line, be sure to look up HenUp. It's a really cool product, and it's like, it makes you want to go out and raise some chickens. Chickens as a service. Tell you what, it's a whole.
You in San Francisco can take that and run with it, please.
I'm building an accelerator around it right now. I have a VC fund. I'm raising a fund of $100 million. Chickens as a service, farm animals as a service. Okay, so next topic I would love to talk about, Tim, is really just focusing on, well, let's see, I've got 2 ones here, but as long as we're talking about innovation, I think we'll skip to the one about kind of your 80-10-20 rule that you had borrowed from Coca-Cola. And
right.
It's a good notion around just kind of strengthening curiosity and having a model there that really provides financial resources and a room to breathe for new innovations. And so if you can just describe for us what that is, and then did that lead to budget for HenUp, or was that a completely different initiative?
Yeah, so this is me speaking for me. I am not speaking for Land O'Lakes broadly speaking in this area. So Coca-Cola, somewhat infamous, had this 80-20-10 model for looking at innovation. Been around a while. I'm a big fan of, like, that's awesome, I'm going to borrow it, and I'm going to reinterpret it. I use this as a way of looking at how we have approached things like HenUp, and it's a way of helping teams think about how we could approach innovation, right? So simply put, 80%, if you have $100, you're going to spend $80 on things work. They are proven. We know that they work. We're going to stick with it. Then you have another $10, and the idea is that there's 10 $1. So there's 10 $1 bets. So in the grand scheme of things, if you have $100 million or $100, you're going to make 10 single dollar bets. And because if they break, what's a buck, right? In the grand scheme of things. And then the important part is the 20. And that, to me, in my mind, the way that gets utilized best is that's optimization dollars. So we've made 10 bets in the scheme of time, and a couple of them worked out. Can we use the remaining 20 to take those and convert them into the new 80? Because you're constantly saying, like, well, the parts of the 80 model may not last. And so how can we continue to make bets and for instance, Hennep might be an example of one of those things, but then turn it around and we've got dollars and we've got process to then decide, hey, now, and there are things that we have learned with Hennep that I know that I have teams that said, hey, we learned this on YouTube, or we learned this with Amazon. Let's go and apply that elsewhere. So that may be an example of that. It's more of a philosophy than a specific example.
Tim, is having that philosophy kind of agreed upon by the C-suite within Land O'Lakes helpful for making quicker decisions, so that you can say, hey, this is our philosophy. We don't need to come back and begging for funds on a new crazy initiative because you guys agreed we have this approach.
Oh, let's be clear. I'm talking from my own perspective here. I don't
Okay.
pretend to speak for our CMO or our head of innovation or whatever. It's more my interpretation of how I see our process working. Again, just one person's opinion of a general way that we can function. I'm sure that we have some boilerplate that would specifically describe it, but I don't pretend to speak on behalf of much smarter people than myself.
Cool. Well, I'll stop trying to get you in trouble then. Final
I'm good
bucket.
enough at it by myself.
Final bucket, and this is really cool because this to me was so unexpected, and it really is very awesome because it's a problem that pretty much every major brand has regarding their content and their assets, and it's about being efficient. And at Media Monks is a quick commercial break. We do a lot of like productions for major brands, and we shoot assets for every single channel, and we try to be really efficient about how we go out and shoot it, so you get everything you need, and you're not just getting a TV spot and then you have to figure out how to turn it into a social post, a few months later, because that's really just kind of a waste of team and dollars. And but you guys have taken it a step further even, and you're looking at your existing assets, and as many brands do, you have just a huge repository and a wealth of content, and why go out and reshoot it all over again? And Tim, how did you approach that issue?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I started at Land O'Lakes 2 years ago. I come out of the advertising industry. I've been on plenty of locations and shoots, and you're always, especially after post-internet, the internet arrives, and it's like, hey, if we're going to be on the set to shoot this thing with, Joe Pick or whoever, could we also capture these other things off to the side because they would be useful on the website, right? And we've all been doing that for the last 15, 20 years or so. But it came into Land O'Lakes, and one of the things as director of content production, people are like, here's some hard drives for you. Okay, what is this? Oh, it's a shoot that we did a year and a half ago. Oh, what's this other hard drive? Oh, it's another production that an agency did for us 2 years ago. Okay, so I'm sitting in my basement at home. I probably have 30 hard drives. And it's like added up, it's probably, 20 terabytes of, and I've looked through a lot of it. It's like, okay, yeah, they did some drone footage on a farm. And then we've got another one and another one. And so part of it is to say, we've got all of these assets and they're in far-flung places. It seems a shame if we would go and commission something that's like, you need drone footage of a cornfield. We have hours of that. I have it in California. I have it in Pennsylvania, like pick. And so the impetus was to, how can we leverage the terabytes of footage that we have, that we know we have rights to, that we know where it was done, we know who produced it, we've got all of the the Blackmagic files, the RE files, the Red files, whatever, we got everything original. So we're borrowing from what sports teams do, when they have all sorts of footage of a game. It's a particular piece of software called CatDV, CATDV, and essentially it's going to sit on our servers, and we're going to input all the terabytes of stuff. So here's 20 terabytes, boom. And what CatDV can do is take in anything. It can essentially read any kind of camera format. Great. Then we're going to throw all of that through some sort of algorithmic machine learning instance to essentially do a proxy set of tags to say, the robots think that's corn, the robots think that's a cow, the robots think that's a sunset, et cetera, et cetera. So then we've got some provisional tags and everything. And then we've got a team of, one of our initiatives has been to find other means of employment for our farmer owners, our farmer members. So, you got someone out driving a tractor, but there are people in the house, and maybe they have degrees in different things. So we developed a supplemental work program for our members, and they do things, accounting things and processing things, but they could also look at footage, right? And essentially say, I'll watch this at 3 times speed and essentially go, yep, the robotic tagging was accurate. So we're going to have humans review all the footage. And then at the end of the day, we have our own Getty images, essentially, of our own footage. So then we've got a repository of tagged footage. We know dates, locations, member names, releases, et cetera, et cetera. Then the big challenge is to go and market this asset. So market the asset across our divisions to our agency partners and say, hey, if you're in a situation where National Farmer Day comes up every June, you want to make something for it, maybe you don't have a budget to go commission new stuff. Hey, look, here's an asset that agency or the internal partners can utilize to go and recycle footage that, hey, here's a great shot that everyone forgot about that was shot 2 years ago on another farm. So that's the impetus there, is how do we leverage content that we've already got? A lot of it's the software, and it's not cheap. But then I think a big part of it is just going to be marketing it to our own teams to help people realize, hey, we've got cool things for you to work with. Look, it's got different colors and, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a big part of some innovation that we're doing at Land O'Lakes.
And Tim, where are you in that process right now? Because I can imagine that would be very helpful during a period like COVID, where it's very difficult to go out and do shoots. And we're still doing shoots, but we're being very, very safe about it. But any chance we can dive into existing content, then we're going to take it, because it's just a matter of risk right now.
So we're actually in the process right now of I'm dealing with our server team to figure out, okay, we have to allocate or provision a set of servers, and then we're working through the whole process with the software company. So we're very early. We've got the architecture figured out. We've got the plan. Now we're beginning to implement it. But to your point, we're doing live shoots now too for all of our different business units. Again, masks and safety, et cetera, following all the union guidelines. But there's a recognition that when we typically go film things, it's typically on one of our member owner property, and we always shoot more than we would ever use, in terms of B-roll and things like that. And so it's just, we're trying to create a habit that says, let's not throw that stuff away. Let's recycle footage, and it might spark someone else in another area down the line for a problem that they're trying to solve. So it's a bit of a mindset thing, but it's also trying to teach people that we can look back at footage that we've created and leverage it and, make it all black and white or recolorize it, or, you might take footage from 4 different shoots and put it together and it looks like this fabulous new thing. So helping people think that way is, I think, a big part of what we're trying to think in a more entrepreneurial way around content.
That's awesome. And I also think it's cool, Tim, how you guys look for these opportunities to engage with the farm community and the farms in your co-op. That's such a special thing, I think, that makes Land O'Lakes really unique, is that you find ways to kind of help them, and you act like a community, and that really must build a lot of goodwill just in general around the brand, around the business. And we didn't talk about this at all in our pre-call, but there's a sense of, I'm sure, culture that is also important for marketing's responsibility to keep that relationship.
Well, so our CEO, Beth Ford, amazing human being. I honestly love working with her. And one of her big mandates that we're working on right now is the American Connection Project, ACP. You can Google it. Plenty of information online. But it's based on that premise of if our rural community, we need our rural communities, all of us, you living in a city, me living in a city, we need our rural communities to be more vibrant, to be more vital. And one of the areas that we're looking into is broadband connectivity. There are millions upon millions of people living out in rural areas who lack access to broadband connectivity. Imagine what that does to education, to healthcare, right? And that can have a negative impact on access to healthcare and education, all of those things, never mind, your tractor connecting to satellites, et cetera. So the American Connection Project is an example of how we as an organization are kind of looking holistically at how our company and our members have an impact on the world at large.
Cool. Well, I think we're at time to open it up for
Okay.
Q&A.
Cool.
I'm sure you guys have a million questions. Those that are following. Will we receive the questions through the little chat panel?
We could talk about others. We got other examples we could talk about if you want.
My gosh, like I can't even believe how much I'm learning.
You're going to have chicken soon, I can tell.
Oh, let's see here. I'm supposed to click on a Q&A button that I can't find. Okay. Well, they're the wonderful people.
It's at the
Grant
top of the
Orders.
screen here.
Okay.
How is Land O'Lakes communicating its inherent sustainability and its mission to consumers? Okay, that's Lauren Galanti just asked that question. How are we communicating it? So we have a business unit called Truterra, and that's the business unit that's specifically focused on the subject of sustainability. And I'll try to be concise. The premise is to say, how do we ensure that farmers are profitable and can sustain? If the farmer loses the business, then there's nothing to sustain. So we look at ensuring that the livelihood of the farmers, the economic viability of the farmers first, and then they've got plenty of incentive to do the right thing for the environment. And so Truterra is a vehicle through that, but you see, American Connection Project is another example of looking at sustainability of communities. And then just the broader, more sort of stereotypical definition of sustainability. I'd have to have you look at our website and read through a bunch of the stuff there, but it's definitely a topic that gets woven into pretty much everything, right? In one way, shape, or another. There's that. Another question says, is this entire series recorded and available post-stream? David's asking that. I'm sure it is. Kyle's asking, how much time or effort is invested in organic social media? That's a question for my partner, Julie Scheif. I think we all learned at this point in time, if you're going to post something and you're not putting media dollars behind it, kind of what's the point?
Yeah.
Sure, we do organic posting, but I think that the lesson that we've been discussing across Land O'Lakes is, and look, unless there's media dollars behind the post, kind of a waste of time. And that's just, again, my personal kind of perspective on what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing. Okay, Paul Schmidt. Hey, Paul. Next product's coming for LOL. Ooh, a lot of software stuff. Software to help farmers optimize and be more sustainable. But we're also, looking into same sort of stuff. How do you help a dairy cattleman or someone with a chicken operation, like, again, be more efficient? And by be more efficient, it's use less things that might be harmful for the environment, right? So it is about a lot of optimizing. I think we're seeing a lot of effort and product in the area of optimizing. Isabel asking, shift to dairy-free options affecting our marketing. Are we leaning in? Yes, we are leaning in. Well, I'll just put it to you this way. Our website on the dairy food side is going to change. You're going to see a new icon soon, and you're going to see a new product line soon that speaks to dairy-free options. Of course, we're looking into it. Of course, a dairy company is looking into these things. Every major dairy brand is looking at dairy-free options. So of course, we're exploring it, trying to understand it, understand the motivations, looking at the pricing models, et cetera. But yes, that's a space that it would of course make sense that we would do that. Tim needs Catch and Release's platform for their video content. Does he know about it? No, I don't know about it. Find me, send me an email. The COVID baking boom. Oh, thank everybody for baking at home. We appreciate all of you. Butter sales are phenomenal. It's fantastic. We love it. Yeah, so it definitely has been affecting people being at home. What else are you going to do? Let's bake something. What are you going to bake? We need butter. So thank you for buying our products. And I know our farmers, thank you for buying our products. Do you have any other questions? Is that it? Yeah, I think that's about it. We nailed them. Nick, we got them down.
Wow, we did not waste a moment, Tim. That was highly efficient. And I'm so glad that you just read through them and answered them, because I would have just added a layer of complexity. So that's awesome. It looks like
I'm sorry, it's just what I do.
awesome. Yeah, I mean, obviously you've done this before more than once. You had your own podcast series, I think. Was there, that was your own podcast as well?
Oh, yeah. So it's a podcast with my dad, because so many people in the choral music space were like, "Oh, if you have a question, you call Philip." And so he's just got this weird history, you know. I mean, he did a startup that was an opera company, you know, in 1966. So basically, it's conversations around opera, around being a choral director at a church, like what's that all about, et cetera, et cetera. So
Cool.
I think there's 14 episodes. We stopped about a year ago, and then COVID happened, and we shifted to doing these things on YouTube, these 10-minute things. So
Amazing.
there you go, making content.
Hey guys, thanks so much. That was a great session. Learned a tremendous amount. You know, I love all the sustainability efforts that and really it sounds like you're kind of digitally transforming a lot of that in terms of what you're doing to support your farmers, Tim. So
Yeah.
Thought that was great. Obviously, great background. Love the music connections. And so I'm going to throw out a today I learned, and it just occurred to me. Today I learned that Land O'Lakes, being in Minnesota, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but being the land of 10,000 lakes, perhaps having a lot to do with the name of Land O'Lakes as an organization?
Yeah, you could read Men to Remember.
Men to Remember. Oh, a little.
Yeah. Oh, charming book written on our 25th anniversary. But yeah, essentially, we were founded as the Minnesota Midwest Creamery Association. Rolls off the tongue, right?
Sure.
And as they started to market consumer products like packaged butter, that wasn't going to fit on the box. And so there was a consumer content. They ran full page newspaper ads. Name our company, and I think it was $500 in gold was like the prize.
Wow, that'd be worth a little bit today.
So it turns out a woman named Edna in St. Louis Park, Minnesota, and another guy in St. Paul came up. Both offered up Land O'Lakes as this, and that's what won. There were some other names that came in second and third that I still want to make T-shirts for, because they're like just so weird. But yeah, Land O'Lakes. We were named by consumers, and yeah, I think very much a reflection of the fact that Minnesota is the land of 10,000.
Yeah, I went to Camp in Bemidji, so that's where
Good for you.
yeah, there you go. So I had suddenly the light bulb went off, and then and so I live here in Chicago in the city, and we've thought about having chickens, but unfortunately, just not really,
Yeah.
the greatest. People joke we have a bunny, 2 dogs, and a cat. So people say we have a city farm, but my kids at their grade school, they actually have a chicken farm.
So they do, yeah.
Yeah, so it's.
I feel like there's an opportunity about here, apartment chickens. It's a new idea, and I think between you and Nick and I, we could develop like apartment chickens, and it could chickens as a service.
There you go.
We're going to be rich. We are going to be rich.
I don't know if my family will be so happy with that. I know that we've wanted to do it, but unfortunately, the city just isn't set up properly for
Right.
Behind the times.
backyard. Yeah, exactly.
We'll just implement it like Uber, and then just see what happens.
Chickens on demand. There you go. It's the Uberization of chickens. Well, guys, thanks so much. Really enjoyed it, and we're gonna move on. So have a great day. Have a great weekend, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Hope to have you guys back on stage soon.
Thank you. See you,
Thanks,
Tim.
guys. We're going to keep things going. I'm pleased to invite Ashley Shapiro, VP, Vice President of Global Media, Performance Marketing, Social Influencers, PR, and International at American Eagle Outfitters. That is quite a title. And moderator Nicole Campagna, Senior Marketing Campaigns Manager, Sure ID. So welcome, Nicole and Ashley.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, Thanks so much. We're super excited to be here today. And I'm really excited for Ashley to share with you a lot of the exciting things that American Eagle has been doing last year and this year as well. We connected, Ashley and I had a chance to briefly connect to discuss what we're going to talk about during this session. And what we really were leaning towards is the exciting things that are ahead in 2021, and also some of the lessons that were learned last year that we can all learn from carrying into this year. I think reflecting back as marketers and just as humans, we've all have a lot to be proud of. A lot of our teams have refocused, they've revamped. And personally, you know, I think Ashley and I both share a passion for both of our companies. We're extremely proud of the organizations that we work for. And for me personally, being able to see the customers that my company serves really reach out to their consumers at their identity level, giving back during the pandemic was really inspiring to see. We saw companies like Rothy's and FabFitFun do special things for nurses and healthcare workers. We saw Comcast getting stuff, special packages ready for Gen Z. And that was really inspiring when there was so much going on and there was so much uncertainty, seeing brands really step up and give back and try to connect when there was so many reasons either not to or hard to during this time was really inspiring. And that's why I'm really excited about this session with Ashley, because American Eagle has really just crushed this last year. Gen Z is their main target market, and they found some really innovative ways to connect with them, which I'm excited for you guys to see. I felt very old when Ashley shared some of them with me. I was like, oh man, I didn't know you could even shop this way. But before we jump into everything she's been doing over at American Eagle, Ashley, I'd love if you could share with everybody, you know, how you came to American Eagle and what you're working on right now.
Sure. So prior to being at AE, I spent about 10 years at Coach. That was the most recent thing that I had done. And during my time there, I really toggled between two roles. One was highly focused on global expansion for the brand. And then the second was really a global strategy role that also included media. But what was amazing about my role at Coach is really being focused in that luxury space, affordable luxury, but still luxury. And with that comes guardrails in marketing, right? So I was super excited about joining a fast fashion brand. At the time, I didn't really know where or what, but this idea of being somewhere where there was a little bit less guardrails, you could have a little bit more fun. And then also this idea of a younger consumer. So the opportunity for AE came up. I was A, really passionate about the product, B, obviously totally hit all those boxes that we just discussed, and C, everyone who I talked with I just really liked them. It was a really good culture fit for me. So I was actually brought on for a different role than the one I have today. I was initially brought on to help build an international marketing organization and take the brand from what I like to call a brand that is a North America-based brand that happens to have some stores overseas to a truly global brand. So started out on that journey and then expanded into a larger role over time. And here we are today.
Yeah, when you talk about, you know, that shift to the Gen Z and that focus, you know, I've noticed that American Eagle, they've set out to be the most relevant and innovative brand. Can you kind of share with us a little bit more about that mantra from the inside?
Yeah, I mean, AE is really synonymous with youth culture as a brand. That's something that's really important to us. And I've sort of developed this North Star that is, one day you're going to ask a Gen Zer who the best in class social and innovation brand is, and they're going to answer American Eagle. I love getting, you know, coverage from trade press and all of those fun things. But the reality is you want the customer to see you that way. So that's sort of my North Star vision. And how we're going about doing that is really these three words that I focus most of my efforts on, and really my team in general. This is really how we think. It's really three words. So it's present, relevant, and nimble. And this really came about, this strategy, during the COVID crisis. And it can mean a lot of different things, but I think this is really what's going to take us to that place of my North Star when I retire. And the Gen Zers all say that American Eagle is the best in class social and innovation brand. But when I say present, it means a couple different things. It's about being in the places where our kids are spending their time. So all of us, we all know that's social. So whether that's TikTok, whether that's Snap, or that's Twitch. So it's about being on those platforms, but it's also connecting the brand with their passions. And when we think about passions for Gen Zers, it's things like music, it's things like gaming, it's things like sports, all of those things. So that's really where I get this presence from. So American Eagle, you will see highly present in those spaces, but that's not the only part of the formula. The second part is about being relevant. So you want to be present, but you want to show up in the right way. That's about content. You don't want to sound like a 40-year-old soccer mom when you're showing up on Snapchat, right? Like that's not how you want to be. So it's really about having the right content and the right talent. And when I talk about the right talent, you know, we all can scan through TikTok and Instagram and all of those, and we can pick out the rising stars, but they need to be the right for your audience, but they have to be right for your brands, right? Like you want it to feel authentic. So for us right now, talent is a huge part of our strategy. So we've worked with, in the past year, 4 out of the top 10 BuzzFeed top TikTokers, that's a tongue twister, of the year. And then 2 out of Forbes is 30 under 30. One of those being Addison Rae, which we all know very well. She's a part of our brand. And when I talk about picking someone who feels right for the audience, but right for the brand, she's such a good example. And the reason why I say that is because Addison really is a regular kid. She was a regular kid who loved to dance and loved TikTok and admittedly wore American Eagle jeans. Even when we hired her, she had a bunch of American Eagle jeans in her closet. She loved the brand. And she really is just using her creativity to just bring herself to life. And she just wants to have a good time. And that's what AE is about. It's about, you know, using our kids to inspire our brand, inspire our customers to feel free and to inspire others. So she really was just such a great fit. And then the third piece is this idea of being nimble. You know, 2020, the plan was no plan. Unfortunately, I think 2021, the plan is like no plan. But what I've learned from it, and I think, you know, my team too, is the shift that all of us as marketers, every single person who I'm sure is listening to this took during COVID 100 times over. You saw the power of being nimble. You saw the ability of organizations, I mean, titanic organizations like the one I work in, just completely shift everything they were doing and come out successful. So I think this idea of being nimble is something that is important, not just because of the crisis, but that's how our customer is, right? Gen Z is changing every day today. It's TikTok, tomorrow it's Snap, it's this, it's that. It's hard to keep up. To your point, when we talked earlier in this conversation, you know, there's new things and new trends and new things in culture coming out every day. So you have to be nimble from every angle.
Yeah. With being nimble, what does your team kind of look like when you were looking to find that talent? Like, I'm just wondering, such a huge organization, you know, what does that structure look like? What do you think that you've leveraged so that you can be nimble in that setting?
Number one thing is collaboration. I mean, and you would think that distance has made that more challenging, but we were actually talking as a group the other day, and in certain ways it's brought us together more, right? Because you have these, it's so easy to just bring people into conversations when it's virtual, right? So it's really about collaborating. The idea that brand and performance are separate, I really don't believe in. I think that organic brand and performance are interconnected. And the best way to be nimble is if from day one, those 3 things are in lockstep, right? Like everything has to be happening in tandem, and they need to understand how when one person does something, it affects the other, and that whole entire journey of a customer. So for me, it's really about finding collaborative people who are experts at what they do, but they understand the value of their counterparts.
That's great. And clearly, you know, you guys have, with you're setting out to be so relevant and innovative, you know, it's no easy task. And it's true, you guys are really everywhere where your consumers are and you're attracting them. How do you balance that with providing that value to your customers?
Yeah, I mean, that's always a dance, right? Like right now or any other time, I think that's a dance for every single marketer in probably every industry, not just specific to ours. But I do believe that there's a right time and a right place for every message. Um, but in terms of like how we acquire new customers and how that plays into it, I mean, I believe that you should acquire customers because they love your product and or they love your brand. You don't want somebody to fall in love with you because you've got a big red sign on your back, right? Like that's not how you gain customer lifetime value. So I really take a seasonality approach to it. And when you think about the right message, again, time and a place all year long for all of them. And value is definitely something that's very important to us. But if we think about the year and how we approach it, you know, holiday is sort of that mecca of retail, right? Where everybody needs to win. So the way that I describe it to people is to say Q1 to Q3, your entire job is to make everyone fall in love with us. You want them to be in love. They can't live without their American Eagle jeans. They need them. They want them. They must be on their list. I will die if I do not get American Eagle jeans for the holidays. So by the time you get to holiday, you get to Q4, it's all about converting. And that's when I think you've built the desirability up and the value message could come into place, because you're not like bringing them in with the value message. You're just converting them that way. Or maybe you're converting mom and dad. So that's sort of how I like to think about it. But there's a place for every message. Just needs to show up in the right way.
Yeah. When you're saying also converting mom and dad, something that I was thinking of was, and I know we kind of touched on this the other day, was I am definitely not in the key demographic for American Eagle, but I found myself returning to the brand just in this setting now. And so it got me thinking and wondering, like, how do you expand that tent to more customers or different customers within the space outside of, you know, that 16 to 25-year-old female?
Yeah. So, I mean, to your point, that 15 to 25 is really our sweet spot. We are the #1 jeans brand in the US for women 15 to 25, men 15 to 25, and women of all ages. So you are in that bracket. So that's really my primary focus, is that 15 to 25. But there's two other layers to this that we really focus on as an acquisition arm to the organization. One is something that I'm super passionate about. About a year and a half ago, we really set out to acquire men in a very aggressive way. The reality is you cannot acquire men the same way you acquire women. Shocking, I know. If anyone gets anything from this entire thing, that's it. So we really did a lot of homework to understand the passions, like I spoke about earlier. And the #1 passion for men 18 to 25 is gaming and esports. And that actually, it's 70%. That is their #1. And the reality is that peaks even higher for pre-college. So we thought, this is where we need to be. And it was such a new space for all of us, me especially. Admittedly, it wasn't something I had a ton of personal experience, and most of my team didn't either. So we really set out to understand the space and understand how we could organically weave ourselves into this space, and a space that really wasn't endemic to a fashion brand, right? We've done so much work over the past year and a half and really focus on that pre-college guy in terms of gaming. The reality is it spans even past post-college. I mean, even into men over 40, it goes on. So my thought process is if you can acquire them at that pre-college where gaming is their #1, and then you can maintain them and maximize their lifetime value, you get the most valuable customer, and you're acquiring them at the first point of entry to the brand. So in terms of gaming, you know, there's a whole entire pool of gaming influencers. There's media, there's Twitch. We've recently launched a collaboration with PS5, which we did some really fun stuff with Snapchat and great work with some influencers, people like Preston Arsment, who is quite a famous gamer. But it's amazing to see how gaming has really skyrocketed. And I think that, you know, the COVID crisis really took it even further, right? You had people with tons of idle time sitting at home. So gaming has even become more important in our kids' lives. The third piece is really about expansion, which I think you were being a little bit more specific about in terms of older women. The way that I look at it is twofold. One is really about life cycle management. Acquisition, I think, really occurs in that sweet spot of 15 to 25 in general. And it's our job as marketers to retain those customers as long as possible. So you fell in love with our jeans in college, but there's no reason why you can't still be a loyal American Eagle customer and maintain that. But that's just not where like the majority of the honeypot goes. With that being said, there are specific products where we take very targeted acquisition strategies to acquire an older customer. So last year we had a jean that came out called the Luxe jean, a little bit more elevated, high rise, meant to really hold it all in. And the idea was to focus on a millennial female customer. So we targeted, I want to say it was like 7 to 10 female millennial influencers who felt really good for our brand, diverse group of girls, some mothers, some not mothers, some on TikTok, some on Insta, different places. And we really leveraged them to reach out to their audience and bring them into the American Eagle brand in a way that feels right for the millennial customer. Whereas a lot of our marketing, again, focused on Gen Z, but by leveraging an influencer, we were able to expand that target demo.
I think that might be actually how I ended up coming back, because I came back through the, oh my gosh, Like to Know It. And it was like an influencer who
it's possible.
Yeah.
So that's an affiliate, but maybe well, let's just say it worked. Let's just go with that.
That worked. So
it worked, yeah.
So one of the things I'm also wondering, I don't think I think the big question is not what changes are coming. I think we kind of know what those are. It's really like what's going to stick, and what changes do you feel American Eagle has put in place that are going to stay around as we go forward?
I think the number one thing, and this isn't really a marketing thing, this is just more American Eagle as an organization. I think this idea of protecting our people first is something that most organizations have taken really seriously during COVID. And I think that's something that will remain paramount. I think everyone will be more vigilant to that, and it'll remain as a primary focus. On the marketing side, at least for me, this nimble, present, and relevant piece is definitely going to stay with us. I think that we learned so much of it. But the second piece is really the importance of brand. I think that especially during times of crisis, almost everybody, whether it's people, brands, organizations, no matter where, the immediate thought process is to pull back, right? Don't spend, save money, save cash flow, focus on conversion only. And we definitely took a very thoughtful approach to that. But with that being said, the importance of brand is extremely important. And I don't think that will change. So the idea being, by staying relevant, perhaps I should do a drinking game of every time I say relevant during this thing, everyone will have a good time. The importance of staying present in your customers' minds, in their eyes, so that when they're ready to shop, they come back to you is extremely important. I think that's here to stay. I think that old mentality of times get tough, pull back is really something, while being, of course, fiscally responsible, is here to stay. I think this idea of being nimble is here to stay. I don't think you can plan that way anymore. You just don't know what the future holds. And I think lastly, new ways to shop. I mean, we have opened up to the world so many ways to shop. I mean, you can shop from home, you could shop on social, you can buy online, you can pick it up in store, you could pick it up curbside. Like there's like 100 ways to shop. You can get same day delivery. I mean, anything you want, it goes beyond Amazon and you can get it. So I think that is definitely something that across industries is here to stay. And if anything, I think it gets stronger. I think it gets more innovative. I think ease of shopping becomes priority for everyone.
Yeah, with the ease of shopping and what you've learned with the nimble pieces of it, American Eagle, obviously it's been the best performing brick or mortar that's come out of this pandemic. So I'm kind of wondering if you could touch a little bit on what maybe traditionally was done, just a little bit, and how that has shifted.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, we are the anchor of the mall. We believe in the mall. I believe in the mall. I don't think, you read articles, retail is dead, the mall is dead. The mall is not dead. Everyone loves the mall. We all love the mall. what I think that we did, and I'm super proud of my team, and if any of them are on this call, congratulations for being so smart and proactive, but we really focused on an omni customer approach way before COVID. That was a huge strategy for us in general. So we had the base there. We were really prepared. In terms of what changed, I mean, obviously when store closed, we had to lean in very, very heavy to digital, especially on the acquisition front, knowing how much acquisition occurs in a store environment to some degree organically, right? In a very different way, whereas digital is a forced acquisition. It got so strong that we actually hit positive omni acquisition during store closures because digital demand was that high. I think, you know, how it will change, I think it evolves. I don't know if I think it changes. I think, as I mentioned before, I think the importance of brand or upper funnel marketing maintained important, or even more so important. You have to stay top of mind. You have to stay relevant. I always use this stat that I read many, many years ago about young consumers. At the time, it was about millennials, and I would probably argue it's even exacerbated for Gen Z. You never see, someone's chatting me in the middle of this. That's so, oh my gosh, how do I make that go away? How often, this actually fits perfectly into what I'm about to say. Nobody does one thing at a time anymore, right? So you're watching Hulu, you're on Instagram on your phone, your iPad's open with something else. And for kids, it's even more. So you really need to stay so top of mind and cut through the clutter with brand in order to stay present. So I think brand marketing, and then I think these new ways to shop is something that we'll go further into. So, you know, a couple that are my kind of AE favorites that have been going on beyond the standard BOPIS, curbside, things of that nature that I think most retailers are doing. There's really three things that we have been focused on that I'm very proud of. So the first one is really leaning into a Sparkle technology that enables social commerce through Instagram, but we've taken it a step further, leveraging our talent, people like Addison Rae, people like Wisdom K, to do AE lives that are shopping enabled. So imagine Addison doing her live, talking about her favorite products, and people being able to interact with her and shop during the live. So that is a very futuristic way to shop and engage. And I think that's the key there, right? So it's not just about shopping. It's about engagement. It's about excitement. You know, it's not just, I can go to the store or I can buy it online, right? Like there's these new ways that people like us never imagined we'd be able to shop. The second is our My AE influencer program. So I want to say, I can't remember when we started this. I want to say about 1.5 to 2 years ago, we embarked on this kind of future of retail, not knowing that retail was about to be turned upside down, and really took our store associates and we empower them to become My AE influencers. And it really is sort of this next level up of associates. And they have ways to go on our Instagram. They all have handles and they can interact with customers. So let's pretend you shop at store XYZ. I'm your favorite sales associate, obviously. And we can kind of speak to each other. I can then show you product in the store. I can host a live. So it's a really personal experience with maybe some of the faces that you know and love to shop. The last one is over the holiday season, we did a partnership with Snapchat and we leveraged their augmented reality technology to create virtual American Eagle stores. I'm going to show you guys one in a second. We had multiple refreshes. We actually had 4. One started with our Disney collaboration. The second was our At Home with AE. And then the third was really this focus on gifts, just shop and get what you need. And then lastly was part of that PS5 collaboration I talked about. So I think the multiple drops, the innovation, the experience that I'm about to show you is really what drove the results. And circle of trust to all of you, the objective was never sales. And the sales of the stores were crazy, to the point that I would say, like, call Snap, make sure that's right. Like, I'm not sure I believe you. The Snap stores resulted in higher sales than some of our brick and mortar stores do on average. You're talking $2 million. On top of that, the click-through rate of our stores were up 150% to the Snapchat US benchmark. So the engagement was just so amazing. So I think those type of experiences are here to stay and are just going to get even more exciting. So let me show you guys one, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think that would be great for them to see. I was blown away by it when you showed it to me the other day.
Let's just see if I can figure out how to do that, to be very, very honest with you. Give me 1 second. Sorry, guys. Modern technology. Is this the right one? Yeah. Okay, let's see. I don't know. Here we go. So if our Snapchat reps are on, thank you for being a dummy in this video that everyone's going to see. So I'm going to walk you guys through the Disney experience. This was the first one we launched when we launched the collaboration in early November. So this is just showing you what it's like for a user. As you can see, personalized, the fireworks come to life, just all these sort of what we call eggs that you uncover. The cursor is Mickey. There he is popping out from the background. You'll start to see the GWP Mickeys are waving to you, and you are actually able to change the color of the fireworks as you're interacting. Goofy hanging from there. So you're able to actually click on product, as you can see, add them to your wish list right from the Snap environment. So it's a truly seamless experience. It'll eventually take you to your cart so that you can check out through Sparkle. But again, I love that cursor. That's my favorite part, the little Mickey hand. I always thought that was so fun. And there's just these moments in it that bring it to life, that take it one step further from just being an e-commerce virtual store. You know, lots of brands, they take their current store environment and they put it in the virtual space, but this is a truly interactive experience. You can share your wish list with friends, and then here you see it checking out. So again, there was multiple experiences. This was one of my favorite just because I think Disney came to life, and there was just so much fun to have with the characters and bringing their personalities alive. So yeah, I love that one.
Yeah, it's so fun. You know, I know we're coming close to almost Q&A time, but to wrap up, seeing all that the company's done and you've done with the company, you know, I'm wondering, while you've been working with the team at American Eagle, like over the past year, you know, I'm wondering, what is it that you have found for yourself that's been most beneficial to your success and your growth?
Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate enough to have my company invest in getting me an executive coach. So I think that having a mentor or a coach, or even a previous manager, or even your current manager who can help you, like, find your strengths, like dig a little deeper. What are your opportunities? It helped me become a better professional, and more importantly, a better leader. I think, especially with everything we've been through, you know, everyone in the past year and change, not even just COVID, right? So many monumental things have happened. It really helped give me the tools to navigate the change, but not just for myself, for my team. I think being able to take a step back and really have someone to help guide you through those things. I mean, you have to guide yourself, but you're guiding your families. I mean, I'm a mother, I'm a professional, I'm a wife. Lots of people on my team, same boat. There was no precedent, right? So I think having somebody or something to help you navigate and give you those tools, I think has been priceless for me, because beyond it just being a job, I have a responsibility to my team, I have a responsibility to myself, and a responsibility to my family. And I think that you're your best self for yourself and for others. You're your best for others when you're the best for yourself. So I think that's something that's just been really beneficial to me.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing that.
No, of course.
That's something I think that we can all do, is like, even if it's executive sponsor or mentorship, right? With somebody to help pull yourself out of that, because we are so like glued into just like kind of our lanes right now.
Totally.
that's going on.
It's hard to step away from the screen.
Yeah.
Literally.
So we're open for Q&A right now. I believe we have our first question that came in. They're wondering, what role does American Eagle see experimental marketing playing in the future of brick and mortar? And will it be integrated into the omni-channel as things hopefully calm down around COVID?
Yeah, and Justin, don't worry, you didn't distract me too much. I'm okay. So I think it's an excellent question, and we have this conversation, I think, weekly. The reality is, I think that experiential marketing will come back to life. I think that we will be one of the first brands ready to go when we feel like it's safe and comfortable for our customers and for us. But I think right now, what we need to do as marketers is create experiences that give people that feeling of connectivity when you can't be connected. And I know this is a roundabout answer, but I just think it's the reality of it. We were very, very active in the music space, Lollapalooza, Govball, etc. So we need to find ways to bring music to our audiences and make them feel connected when we can't be. So we had launched At Home with AE. We had done a virtual concert, things of that nature. We also did some surprise and delights where we had customers go into a sweepstakes to win these experiences. So you had moments where Noah Beck and Addison Rae were sitting around virtually in a Zoom with 15 winners, like real AE customers who sat around with them and got to ask them questions. So you need to create connectivity. But I think for now, I think in the very short term, I think we need to pause on in real life experiential, but I promise you that when it's safe, we will be lined up to be one of the first there for everyone.
That's great. And Justin definitely giving the applause, and I agree with the Snap campaign was such a great way with not being able to do those experiences in person. I also loved about that was I used to work in retail a long time ago, and that's the only way my customers could shop from me. There was no other option. Like they would just call. Yeah. So I would think for our youth that's working in those stores, that's also a great skill set for them to keep up as they continue to having to connect with people in those different ways.
Yeah.
Another question that has come in is, what are your brands currently doing in terms of your in-store and e-commerce strategies?
I mean, what are we doing? I mean, I think that in-store and e-commerce are still both equally important. I think that in the near future, you know, we all have to remain nimble and understand that there's going to be moments of digital surge. I think right now it's about being cautiously optimistic. I think the stores are still business critical, but something that, you know, Nicole, you and I talked about the other day was, I think that this has expedited the possibility that there will be a real shift in the role of stores and e-commerce. I think that stores are going to need to become more experiential. I think people are going to be going there for what they can't get in an e-commerce experience. And I think the role of social commerce may end up replacing a transactional e-commerce experience. So I think we might see a little bit of a flip in the future, and this potentially has expedited it because people are finding creative ways to get those experiences, like what I just explained with my AE, right? Like if you're going to a store because you want to interact with an associate, you can. Nothing will take away the experience of touching and feeling product by any means, but I think that stores are going to have to work harder.
Definitely. What do you think?
Like future.
Yeah, that completely makes sense. And what do you think with that? You know, what do you think is the biggest challenge that the the retail in-store and e-commerce experiences is going to face?
The biggest challenge? I mean, I think the biggest challenge is going to vary based on your industry and your target, right? Like, I think that, for example, I think older demographics will really struggle with the shift. So I also think it might come in phases based on your target, right? Like, I think that's a huge piece of it. But I think the reality is what I'm discussing is not cheap, right? Like, it's much more expensive to acquire customers digitally than it is in stores. I think that store environments, to make them experiential, not only will you need to make them experiential once, you'll have to keep on refreshing it, right? That's not a stagnant process. People are not going to come to ride the same roller coaster every single day. So they'll need to have reasons to shop. There'll need to be reasons to come to store, and I think in a different way. That'll be challenging. And also, I mean, just the cost behind all of these things, I think is very challenging for brands in general.
Yeah, that's a great point. Would you, out of that, with those challenges, I hear there's also like lots of opportunity. I'm thinking for like innovation in those challenges. Is there anything that's sticking out to you in this year ahead that you see as a really big opportunity for you and the company, and how you'll continue to connect with your customers and kind of push that envelope?
I mean, I can tell you, I mean, I cannot tell you what our innovation ideas are, because then everybody would have them.
Well,
Nicole. So you're
yes.
not going to trick me into that one, but that was good. No, I mean, I think the reality is things like that Snap Store. I think social commerce for us is really business critical. And I think balancing that with things that are not transactional is also really important. So I think ways to find innovation in terms of the type of content that we're creating. So just to give you an example, innovation doesn't need to be commerce. It could be something like our holiday campaign was fully animated. The back to school campaign was shot completely remotely via Zoom. So innovation can come to life in many different ways. But I also think the reality is we need to be first. You need to look at the betas. What are the new things that are coming out? How are kids interacting with product? What happens with AR? What happens with audio, voice, like all of those things, and how people experience products and interact with one another, I think are all things to watch out for.
Mm-hmm. What about for you, as a marketer, what is it that you're really looking to, maybe learn in this year or challenge yourself with what's ahead?
To be brutally honest, I think my biggest challenge, and then I can go into learning, is, my boss always says to me, Ashley, bring the glitter, keep on bringing the glitter. And the challenge with bringing the glitter is you always need to find more, right? Like you're only as good as your next best thing. So I think it's really challenging ourselves to continue to stay and build this momentum. You have to continue to outdo yourself in some way, your own worst enemy. So I think if I'm being brutally honest, that's something that does keep me up at night, is innovating season after season after season. In terms of what to learn, I want to learn how far we can go. I want to learn if we can get to that type of place where we have a Gen Zer walk around and say, you know what? American Eagle, whoa, did you see them? That's sort of what I want to learn how to do and figure out how to get there.
Great. Well, thank you, Ashley, so much for your time today. I think this has been a great session, and love learning more about what's going on with American Eagle and all of the innovative things that you've been doing. So thanks for everything.
Thank you, Nicole. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Ashley, Nicole, great session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Martin. Have a good weekend.
Oh,
no, you want me to
I was going to I was just going to, I was going to tell you, Ashley, I mean, listen, with all that's happened in retail, they've talked about a retail apocalypse, and, there's been so many bankruptcies in retail over the past couple of years. And now the pandemic hit, right? This time last year. I just want to say kudos to you guys for, really taking the steps necessary to really, it's really more of from my perspective, it's been more of that transformation. It's really a transformation, not an apocalypse. And brands like AE have really done a great job to make that transition to that more social commerce and e-commerce. And it was exciting to really hear of all those things that, that AE is doing, and really your view on what retail is going to look like after we come out of this. I think, you're absolutely right. It's, the real estate environment has completely changed, right? And now as a retailer, what are you going to do to bring people in? And I thought that was really interesting. So
we'll keep on doing it. The mall, I promise you, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, but my only prediction would be that the mall is something people will always love. There's no experience that will ever replace being able to touch product, interact with product, and interact with people.
Totally agree. And by the way, I have a 16-year-old boy who is a gamer, in case you ever need, someone to join a focus group.
Yes, we have many focus groups of one people's child that we would love for you to join, Martin. Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Have a good one. Bye.
All right. Fantastic. All right, guys. Well, we are going to head into my fireside chat with Brian Clevenger, who is the Vice President of Corporate Marketing at BlackBerry. I'm really excited. Brian, hey, how are you?
I'm well. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Nice to see you again.
Good seeing you as well.
So I'm super excited to talk to Brian. I learned a lot during our conversation with Brian on what's happening at BlackBerry, and I'm excited to share this with the rest of the audience today. If we can jump in real quick, most of your career, Brian, has been spent on the creative side of the business, as we talked about, and now you've moved into a more traditional corporate marketing role. And, if you could share with everyone, how your career from the creative side of the business has really sort of influenced your current role, I think that'd be great to hear and would be really informative for a lot of folks.
Yeah, well, as my agency friends like to say, going to the dark side.
No, going to the dark side would be coming over to the sales side. That's truly the dark side.
Oh, you might be right. You might be right. It's interesting because if you look at the landscape, more and more creative people are going internally. I mean, that's just how the business is moving. I think a lot of that has to do with, agency fees. I think that has a lot to do with getting things done at a rapid pace. If it's done internally, obviously we're not having hallway conversations right now because of COVID, but all those things that kind of happen within the four walls. So, before BlackBerry, I was at Veritas, and that was me kind of dipping my toe into the corporate world to see, okay, is it really too cold to hop in before you do the cannonball? And, I made that leap because it was like, oh my gosh, I get to build a team. I get to build a brand. I get to refine processes on how work gets done. And it was all of this at a broader scale. And I got to meet with the CEO, the CMO, and I had direct contact with those people. So the business was moving that way. So part of my decision to do that was basically based on where the business was moving. I was also getting older. I had a son. Agency hours are long hours. However, I am learning that BlackBerry's long hours with a rebrand. But that's basically where the business was going. But whether it's agency side or client side, for me, it's always been the opportunity. It's like, okay, can I work with really, really good people? Can I work with passionate people? Do I get a shot at rebuilding a brand? And that's why I joined BlackBerry. And with BlackBerry, it was a little different because, again, I've always managed creative teams or clients, being a creative director. And BlackBerry, it's like I oversee 7 or 8 different divisions, from campaigns, from web, from brand to creative, so on and so forth. So for me, it was kind of like a step in another direction. And also, I think it gave me the ability not only to control the narrative and the brand itself, but every touch point, everything that the customer comes in contact with. But I would say, coming from the agency side, this is just me kind of personally speaking, I think it's harder to go from client to agency because the culture is so different. It's drastically different. And I think going from agency side to client side, especially for a creative person, we're problem solvers. And, today I'm solving process problems within BlackBerry. How do we get to good work? How do we build in time to do things properly on top of a brand, on top of this? But I think a lot of people who grew up in the agency world, solving clients' problems, for me personally, I feel like I might have a little bit of an upper hand stepping into that world and solving problems.
That's a great analogy, and that's really interesting. I think that switch, as you mentioned, going to the client side is a lot easier, or excuse me, the other way around. So anyway, I'm going to mix the questions up a little bit because I think as we started, it really struck me that so many people are kind of unaware of what BlackBerry has been up to. And as
even if they're around, right?
Well,
sorry.
Yeah, no, I know. And so we can talk. I want to talk about some of the the deals that have been struck lately in the news and so forth. But I think it'd be great if everybody can kind of understand the transition that BlackBerry has made from a hardware company to a software company, and that again most people aren't aware of. And everyone obviously has fond memories of their BlackBerry, and some still have them as keepsakes. So why don't you, would love if you could share with everyone, like, what has transformed with BlackBerry, what you guys are up to, how much the business has transformed from that hardware side of the business that everybody's familiar with.
Yeah, so I mean, we've done kind of a dual pivot actually. We've gone from consumer to enterprise, and then from hardware, the handheld, and then into software. So now we have to overcome two things, which is like, okay, let's kind of bring on the challenge. But to me, what's really interesting, and I actually did not know this until I got within BlackBerry, is that the handheld was super productive. Obama loved his, but what made it truly powerful was the security on the servers for email and messaging, the security in the device itself. So when John Chen took over as CEO, I think it was roughly 7 years ago. I think I have the numbers right, according to Mark Wilson, our CMO. We were bleeding over $1 billion a quarter. We were just losing money. And John had roughly 1 quarter to fix that. And, the turnaround king that he is, he did that. And he bet the farm on security because it was baked into that handheld. And it's like, oh, okay. So what we've done is, in the way that I like to say it, and the way that we put it into the narrative and the analysts love, is we've taken that security that you held in the palm of your hand, we're putting it in everything you touch. So the security thing we've been doing for quite some time, basically since the devices have been around. We've just kind of taken that and put it into everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. It's 175 million cars. Like, that's the AWS thing with Ivy and Earth.
That blew me away when you told me that you guys I read about the AWS deal and the fact that you're in 175 million cars. Yeah. Never knew. I mean, It just is not talked about. Would never have thought of it.
No. And for me, I come from a writing background and a brand guy, it's the greatest story that's never been told. But then again, if you're focused on turning around a company in 1 quarter, you've got bigger priorities than brand. But going back to when we say everything, it's 500 million endpoints. The car is an endpoint. Medical devices are endpoints. Your laptop is an endpoint. The International Space Station, like what? Like, we're on this planet and not on the planet. What is it? 7 of the G7 governments. So essentially everything that has heightened security or cannot fail, that's where we kind of play. And it's interesting. I mean, there's so much raw material for myself and for my team to work with. It's pretty amazing to tell that story. And the challenge has been, and we have a massive rebrand coming out in March. And the simplest way to say that, and what we're kind of picking up on a lot of advertising, is the security you held here is now in everything you touch.
There are specific, you talk about this rebranding and being so, ever present in all these different areas. What, like, when you're rebranding under those circumstances, like, what do you, I know we talked about it. When you talked about, your conversation with I can't remember, was the CMO or the CEO, when you asked him, who are we trying to reach? And he kind of said, everybody, except don't ask me for that budget.
Exactly.
So how do you manage that? How do you, where are you focused, and how, with, such a wide disparity of products and markets to go after, how do you really kind of focus in that rebranding messaging?
Yeah, and I mean, as much as I would love to share where everything is at, because I'm super proud of the work. It is.
That you can share, right? That you can share. They're allowed to share.
I can't. Maybe in the next one, once we get some more approvals, and legal, of course, has blessed it. But for me, we obviously we're taking an integrated approach at that top level, and it's kind of a classic story. When you haven't seen a friend in 7 years, what's the first thing you ask? What have you been up to? So we need to answer that. And for us, that's the what. What do we do? Because people are going to see the logo BlackBerry, and the next question is, where's the damn device? And they're going to see a picture of an astronaut, for instance. And It's like, okay. So what we're doing in broad-based media, we're basically buying eyeballs, because we need to shift that perception. And we're going to tell the story. The security that you trusted here is now in everything you touch. Like now we've moved from security in one place into everywhere. So broad-based media, educating the public, that's, Wall Street Journal ads, that's New York Times ads, that's, site takeovers, that's big display, broad reach to laminate that message and really shift that perception. And from that point, we've really focused in on 3 categories, and we can be very targeted from a digital perspective. And that's critical event management with some of our products. That's IoT. Ivy is a big thing with that. QNX is a big thing with that. And then cybersecurity, which is kind of the core of everything that we do, which is big business now with people working from home. So, kind of focusing on those market categories. And that's how we've kind of skinned this. So you've got your brand broad reach, really educating the public. We are a security player. And the security you loved here is now everywhere. And then really hitting hard those 3 market categories, with security being the core message, but how it's applicable to those various industries.
Right. And reaching a different audience. It's really more of a enterprise B2B audience than the consumer broad-based, which is just kind of, hey, by the way, here's BlackBerry, but this is what we are now.
Exactly. And, in those conversations, it's like, okay, well, who is the audience? And the audience is kind of everybody. It's interesting because, you have your influencers, you have Wall Street, where, again, it goes back to seeing that logo and not seeing a device. It's like, whoa, like what just happened? Like we need to help people get there. And I think we can, because the beauty with BlackBerry and hearing John and Mark Bolson, CMO, talk about it, nobody disliked it. And when somebody had it, they loved it.
They loved it. Passionate about it. It was definitely passion.
Absolutely. And then, you think about, words like trust and safety. We mobilize the workforce single-handedly, so that trust factor is there. And for somebody like me being a brand guy, the turnaround story or reintroducing the world to a brand they absolutely loved in a different light, it's kind of the ultimate gig. It really is. But it's exciting. And the company's awesome. You can see our stock. We're in a good spot. We're kind of on a tear. It's a rocket ride right now. There's the full support of the organization. It's just, there's a lot of good things happening.
Yeah, no, it's definitely exciting. And speaking of some of the good things happening, and you touched on it a little earlier with when you mentioned AWS and the Ivy platform. Talk to everybody and share with us a little bit more about that partnership. You can. I know that was announced back in December 1st. So hopefully you can talk about it. But I think that was really interesting. It's the intelligent vehicle data platform and 175 million vehicles. And when we were talking about it yesterday, you brought up so many different features and information that can be shared that can be relayed back to the manufacturers in terms of the consumer experience as a driver that will impact the future development of autos. That really sort of struck me. So can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because I thought that was just really intriguing.
Yeah, in this day and age, everything's connected, and it's really protecting that sensor data. So for the manufacturer, so we can personalize the driving experience for the driver. And I think if you look at where autonomous vehicles are going, security is paramount. Somebody hacks that, it's a different story than your bank account, which is FDIC insured, and they can replenish the money. Car's a whole different ballgame. But securing that data and getting anything that might need to go back to the manufacturer and personalizing the experience for the driver. And of course, that stuff is in the cloud, AWS being the largest cloud provider. And I think also being aligned with that kind of brand is just, it's great. It's really, really great. But, it's all built on the knowledge of QNX, which is that embedded technology, which is in 175 million cars. And now aligning that with, cloud and updates and things of that nature. But at the end of the day, it's really protecting those sensors and getting the data off of that, getting it to the manufacturer, getting it to the driver, and really personalizing those kinds of experiences. But again, protecting it. That again, everything with BlackBerry is about security.
Got it. And so along those lines, what do you think the biggest impact of this partnership will be for the auto industry? Because you've got electric cars, You've got self-driving cars now that they're talking about, that they've been talking about for a while. And now with this information that you can share back, how do you think, let's look 3 to 5 years down the road. How do you think what do you think the biggest impact to the auto industry would be from this partnership with AWS?
No doubt security. I mean, there's no questioning it. I mean, if you look at some of the spaces we play in, again, I referenced, financial and FDIC insured, medical. Like, if something like a Da Vinci machine gets hacked, that's not good. Automobile is the same way. And, there's bad players out there. Like, I was listening to a Wall Street Journal podcast the other day, and they were talking about public schools being hacked and, being held for ransom. And I'm like, okay, that's a whole different level of evil. Like, it really is.
Oh, yeah.
And you think about a public school, which doesn't have any money, doesn't have a secure infrastructure. Security is not top of mind. And then what they were doing was releasing teachers' social security numbers on the dark web.
Oh.
Like, really? Like, whoa. Like, I mean, it just kind of shows you just like how bad people can be. And when you factor in a moving vehicle that can, travel speeds up to 80, 90, 100 miles an hour, security is going to be paramount. And as things become more autonomous, it's just going to be more and more imperative. It really is.
Yeah. No, I hadn't really thought about it from that perspective. And, it's so funny. I was listening to a seminar or online seminar the other day, and you brought up ransomware or a ransomware for the teachers or schools. And this guy brought up the fact that these criminals now actually have a call center to be able to answer people's calls to inform them how to acquire Bitcoin to be able to really, pay the ransom.
Yeah.
It's a crazy world.
It's a giant business. It's horrifying. It's horrifying. Like, we released not too long ago the Bahamut report, which is a hack for hire group, and that came out of our BlackBerry Labs, which is like intelligence and research and all that stuff. And it's just like, wow, you can go around and hire these people. Like, it's really horrifying. And there's no doubt that they've gotten more sophisticated. And that's why our security now really brings in machine learning and artificial intelligence. And, this is smarts that it just doesn't sleep. And, when you look at the amount of touch points that we're in and learning from all of that, it's pretty amazing applying, those types of learnings to security. And I think the fascinating thing about BlackBerry is if you think back to our heritage being, our heritage is around mobile. We've always been about security that moves with you. And I think when you look at security as a whole, it's always kind of been about what you stop or what you prevent. It's been very reactive. It's rarely proactive or preventative.
Oh, yeah.
And I think given our heritage, the Cylance acquisition, which is AI and machine learning, like all of that's feeding into just a really great offering that we're serving up as intelligent security.
And let me ask a question. We didn't talk about this yesterday, but I'm curious as you've brought up all the security, and everybody talks about blockchain being an incredibly secure environment. Is that has blockchain been a part of that? Is that has that been something that you're looking into, or is that anything that's been a part of the security aspect of what you're doing?
Off the top of my head, I don't have an answer.
Okay.
I mean, what the labs might be working on.
I know it wasn't anything we talked about, but I just wanted to at least, ask that because I was kind of curious.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, I haven't heard anything, but then again, I've been heads down kind of on the brand and kind of what is the story in that rollout. But yeah, I mean, my guess is like wherever security is paramount and failure isn't an option, we're going to play in that space. What is it, 7 of the G7 governments? I mean, just Department of Defense. I mean, like any highly regulated or business that needs to be highly secure, whether that's medical, financial, governments, like our ad hoc product, a lot of the COVID messaging comes out over that, which is really, really interesting. It's really secure crisis communication. You'll probably find us in there some way, shape, or form, if not yet, someday.
Got it. Thanks. And, I know we talk, we talked a little bit about when you joined and sort of, yesterday in terms of what you were going to be laying out to do and your conversations with the CMO and the CEO. Talk a little bit about that, your first sort of experience when you came over to BlackBerry and what you were going to lay out. And obviously you've talked about the launch to a certain extent, but and then I want to learn more. So like, as you look out after you've had this, brand relaunch, if you will, what are your biggest challenges after that? In terms of, kind of when you started, you've got the relaunch, and then where do you go from there?
Yes. I mean, it's interesting because I shared this story with you when the recruiter reached out to me and she said BlackBerry, and I'm like, they're still around? Because I hadn't heard anything, and it's just me being naive. Like I just hadn't heard anything.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. And then she said security, and I'm like, okay, this is getting more and more interesting by the minute. And then, in some of the interviews in talking to Mark Wilson and, security held in your hand, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, this is kind of interesting. And then, once you start kind of looking at all that and adding it up, I mean, I spent some time with our web team and looking at website traffic. 75% of traffic was going to devices. I'm like, okay, the problem is what? It's not why, it's what. Like, people don't know what we do. And me being a writer, it's like, all right, that's a story problem. So, I kind of laid out my plan with Mark, and I'm like, I think we need to start telling the right story to the world. This is like classic branding. It's a perception shift. Recall value of BlackBerry is probably off the chart, but you ask them what, they probably say device. Yes. Okay. So we sat and, we wrote the narrative of the company. It was 3 awesome meetings with John Chen, our CEO. We agreed on the narrative. He was very, very clear. He's like, I don't want to lose the heritage. I think that's important. It's like, absolutely. There's no negative connotation with BlackBerry. So we wrote that. We shopped it around. That was approved. It's like, okay, what's next? We need a good look and feel that champions this narrative. We worked with 2 agencies on that. It was roughly 6 weeks worth of work. Mark and we narrowed it down to 3, had one meeting with John, walked him through 3 different directions. He's like, what do you guys think? And I said, well, I like number 1, like number 3. Mark and I were in the same boat. He's like, I like number 1. It was dubbed epic because of the dramatic photography. We shopped that around a little bit. People are like, wow, that's pretty cool. We like that. Okay, the story seems great. We moved everything in-house, and we just started writing everything from print ads to digital ads to the website, everything internally. The only thing we outsourced was kind of the design, and we'll start to slowly push things into market in February, and then Q1, which is March, is the big push. And I'm fortunate, like I have an awesome creative team. I have an awesome web team. The media team is exceptional. We've got big media backing it. But not only did we reposition BlackBerry, retell the story, redo the look and feel, 75% of this was done in-house. So not only are we looking at rebranding it, we're looking at it as to doing rebranding a little differently.
Nice. That's exciting. And as you look beyond, as you look, to the next 2 to 3 years, what do you look at? What do you see as the biggest challenges from that perspective? As you've now rebranded, you've now retold your story. What's sort of the next generation of where you? If you can share, what are the biggest challenges you look at from that perspective?
Totally. I think priority number 1 is shifting that story and making sure people know us for what we're incredibly great at. And I think, we did an awareness study. So we have some, baseline learnings from that. It's making sure that the brand is tracking, we're raising share of voice and all of those good things. And then I think this is the hardest thing with any brand is maintaining consistency. Everybody struggles with it. I worked on BMW for a number of years. Even they struggled with it. It's not a hard math formula. The great brands are great because it's a consistent message, consistent design told over time. And that's how you build that equity. And I think if we can be consistent with that, that builds over time. And I think, pushing the brand out, we're also looking at those 3 key market categories. I think we'll make a shift at some point, probably fairly soon, once we cement the security message into those areas. And really, how do you ramp up and talk about the importance of security in those areas as well?
Fantastic. Yeah, no, that's and you're in so many different, as you talked about earlier, so many different verticals and so many different industries. It begets, you can start to really sort of expand into those others that you haven't gone maybe as deep into yet, and start to market to those sort of niche audiences that you haven't necessarily reached with your broader based rebrand, and then start to retell that story in that perspective. What do since you've come on, what have you found to be like the biggest challenge so far? You looked at it as hey, wow, this is a great opportunity.
Sure.
I've got all this opportunity to really rebrand what already was a heritage, great brand name, no negativity. But what would you say, like when you first took, you first took the job and you're in there, what scared you most about, that first day, or, when you first started out?
I mean, no doubt. I mean, there's such weight with the word brand. And it can be a loaded word too for tech companies, especially B2B. Sure. Is it an art project? It's like, well, no, actually it's not. I would say that, and this was true of Veritas actually too. And it's true of a lot of tech companies that I worked with when I was on the agency side. One is the big one is process. If you think about whether it was Veritas or BlackBerry, in the agency world, there's a tried and true process. There's a brief, there's concepting time, there's build out time, there's execution time. There's a standard process that agencies are known for. Those don't exist. It didn't exist at Veritas when I built it. And I'm actually thankful that hopefully nobody from Veritas is online, because that was kind of like the guinea pig test. And I actually got it to work. It's like, okay, I can take those learnings and apply it to BlackBerry. But process has been a challenge. Understanding why things take the time they do. And when you're architecting a brand, you want toolkits and templates that can expedite that, no doubt about it. But like educating people on the process, I think has always been, I wouldn't say a challenge, but the biggest learning curve. And I told Mark early on in a lot of the interviews, I'm pretty fortunate. I taught a master's writing program at the Art Academy for like 7 years. So if I wasn't doing this, I would probably be a teacher in some form or fashion. And I've always tried to kind of demystify the brand and creative process, because I feel like where creatives kind of sell themselves short, or brand people, is when you make it seem overly mysterious and don't really bring people along for the ride. And I find that like when you do that, people are just that much more excited about it because they understand it. And so those are the two things. And I wouldn't call it a challenge. I think it's always been more work than I thought it would be, is educating people on, good thinking, strategic thinking, how it's holistic thinking, and then the process of getting there. And my guess is that's true almost anywhere you go, for somebody who does what I do. Now the beauty is with BlackBerry, people are willing to listen. They really are. It's like, oh, this makes sense. Can you tell me more? And I have the support of the entire organization. I think I said this on our call earlier. I have yet to be told no, which is amazing.
Yeah,
it's
exciting.
It's great. I mean, even, in my
other than the budget to reach everybody.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, hopefully what'll happen is the brand will go live. We'll get a lot of traction, and then, the wallet will open up. But it's funny, like in my last interview with BlackBerry, I kind of mapped out the phases of how I would approach this. It's your standard kind of approach. And we have followed that to a T. And I'm 8 months in now. Again, I said, and I'll say it again, it's kind of the job I've wanted for a long, long time. It's a pretty great gig.
And did you find much resistance to a lot of putting those processes in place internally when it sounds like you definitely had the support from the top down, which is critical in any transformation or anything, any process that you go through, because, as you're looking to change processes and so forth, if you don't have that support,
Yep.
you get undercut left and right, because people are like, well, it's not really a priority for the organization. Did you find any of that resistance as you were going through and trying to change those processes? Because they just, you talk about education and you had to go through and educate them, but did you find resistance in the organization with it?
Yeah, I wouldn't say resistance. I mean, there's definitely pressure to perform and get stuff in market. I think especially when you look at things like demand generation. So those are the realities of business. I think it was more of, okay, are there times where we can truncate this? And there absolutely is. I think it was more of, I'm speaking a language that a lot of people just don't understand. And it wasn't resistance. It was more of, okay, help me understand this. And then, I use this term, Mark Wilson, our CMO, uses this term all the time, show people what good looks like. And then suddenly it's like, I want more of that. And once they see that, they don't care how you get there, they just want that. And what I found is people are so focused on what they do, they don't want to play copywriter, they don't want to play a designer, they don't want to play strategist. It's like, just give me the goods. That's what I need. And if this process is going to help me get there, fine, I'm willing to listen, but more like questioning and understanding how it all works. That's kind of what I've experienced. Not so much like no, and then you show them end product and it's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, no, because in a lot of organizations, certainly one as established as BlackBerry, you could find some hesitancy to change things. But it's great that you've been able to really do that and not meet a lot of that. It sounds like it's been more just an education process of like, hey, here's what we need, here's what I want to change, and here's why, right? Here's why we need to change that. Well, cool. I think we're wrapping up kind of at the end of our time. So I want to open up the Q&A. If anybody has any questions for Brian, please jump in and into the Q&A session and ask a question. I've got one question so far here. So in this age of acute cybersecurity, and given BlackBerry's top of class reputation, have you found that people questioning I don't know, the not necessarily the quality of I should say maybe the what's the right way to put this, that in the question is that this is what BlackBerry was. Why do you what is it about cybersecurity with BlackBerry now that is so special that I should really be paying attention to?
I mean, I think it actually goes back to that mobile heritage.
Yeah.
I mean, if we could secure something that was on the move, and what I find really, really fascinating is, if you go back 30 years, it was security in that handheld, and that was mobility. We single-handedly mobilized the workforce.
Yeah.
Now we're in cars, which move. We're in the International Space Station, which moves. It's kind of fascinating for me to kind of think about that. But yeah, I think given the fact that we've always secured things that work with you, not against you, that to me, that's what's really, really fascinating. More than anything.
And next question, what would you say, kind of building off of that is what's been the biggest misconception about BlackBerry?
I mean, I think for broader audiences, when's the next phone coming out? Okay. I mean, seriously, mean, that is my gosh, I can't tell you the number of conversations we had internally. When somebody sees that logo, they're going to expect to see a phone, and they're going to see a picture of an astronaut talking about securing the space station.
Right.
What? Okay. Now, as a marketing guy, I'm like, sweet, I gotcha. Now I want to tell you the story, but it's mainly, when is the handheld coming out? Now, in the cybersecurity space, those who play heavily in that, those who monitor that are customers, of course. Those looking to implement those types of technologies, they know us. They absolutely know what we do. But it's really influencing that broader audience, whether that's Wall Street, whether that's the analysts, to make sure that everybody is, quote unquote, reading from the same script.
Got it. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great point. Any other questions right now for Brian? I think we've got a few more minutes. Give everybody another minute or two, see if they want to ask any questions. And if not, we'll move on to our next session. Okay. I think we're ready to move on to the next session. So Brian, thanks so much for your time. It was
Awesome.
a great session. It was great talking to you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And thanks everybody for joining.
Fantastic. Thanks.
Awesome. Take care.
Fantastic, everyone. Well, again, Brian, thanks so much. Great conversation. For our second to last session of the day, I'd like to invite Michael Craig, Senior Director of Global Marketing Communications at Harman International, and Sean Horvath, Chief Revenue Officer at Stream Elements. And welcome, guys. So glad to have you.
Thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. So love to hear from you guys. Take your stage is
Take it
yours.
away. All right. Well, Michael, good to see you and talk to you again. We obviously so I'm excited to have the session with you, and welcome everyone. I think it's probably best, Michael, you want to kick it off and give yourself a little background on you and your role and so forth, and then I'll do a little bit by same, and then we'll get into really the purpose of this, which Michael and I are going to talk to you guys about, really the challenges of last year and being innovative, but specifically being innovative around content and how specifically Michael used a lot of his existing media and shifted it to be more innovative in the content in this world, whether it's on platforms and interaction. And then obviously I will give a little more breadth to that as Stream Elements has developed a lot of engaging kind of content platforms during this COVID time as well. Michael, I'll kick it off over to you.
Absolutely. So again, Michael Craig with Harman International, Senior Director overseeing our global creative as well as our gaming platform with the recent launch of JBL Quantum. I've been with the company for a little under 2 years, and have had a tremendous experience kind of getting to know the industry and learning a lot about sound and the importance that it plays in people's lives.
Great. I appreciate that, Michael. Again, thanks for joining. We're excited. And for myself, Sean Horvath, Stream Elements, and a quick little background on I joined the company a year ago. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer, and Stream Elements' purpose is they provide the the operating system for all live streamers to actually broadcast across Twitch, Facebook, YouTube, and utilizing these audience tools that they broadcast through our cloud-based system. We work with advertising partners on really immersive programs. We have not worked with Michael, but have worked with other partners like Pepsi and P&G and Mondelez in this space, just to really impact content and make it more engaging so that the way the viewer is just not watching, but they're engaged and kind of connecting with the creator.
Don't worry, Sean, if you play your cards right today, we might be able to work something out.
Well, that's Michael. I appreciate that, although not the purpose, but thank you. So, Michael, I think yesterday it was really exciting when you and I first spoke. We talked a lot about how data had been, everyone's media is focused a lot on data, and while you need the data for scale and purpose and to really target the audience, that it's taken in the past year or so like a little bit out of the content and what the purpose of content is and how that makes more engaging. So I'd love to start off with what you shared with me yesterday of how you guys faced that this year. And then I think we can probably apply it a little more down to gaming and put a little more into the verticals of how it did, but talk about the challenges, because I think that's a great topic overall.
Absolutely. So I think any marketer was excited as kind of this wave of big data was kind of being unleashed kind of across most of the things that we were doing, where you knew that you can actually go out and find consumers where they were when they were most primed to make a purchase. You knew how to find them in those channels and really communicate with them very effectively. And I think the tendency there, or at least the thing that you were tempted to do, was push them directly down to the bottom of the funnel. Like, hey, I know where you are. I know you might be leaning towards this, and so like, let me just push you through the bottom of that funnel to really unlock this additional sale. And when that happens, you start to forget like some of the fun stuff that is supposed to be happening at the top of that funnel, and that's where the foundation of your brand is really being built. I like to use the analogy of of agriculture. Like when you're at the top of that funnel, like you're really planting the seeds for the future. So these are things that will not pay off today or tomorrow, but 6 months from now, when someone is actually entering into a marketplace, if you played your cards right, if you've actually done the work at the top of that funnel, then it's way easier to escort them down through the conversion phase. And I think again, with the advent of the big data and that the movement behind that, it's really been tempting to jump straight to the bottom. And so as the world has evolved over the last year, I think what we've seen is kind of the resurgence of the importance of the top of that funnel, the content that's being created, the engagement that you're looking to really establish with consumers. And I think it became even more important just because people were now, in front of their computers, multiple hours out of the day, searching for additional content, searching for additional things that they could engage with, that they would find compelling. And I think it's forced us to say like, hey, I can't, at some point I can't just continue to push the sell. I need to give you something else to really attach yourselves to, and something that I want you to know about my brand and the things that we're doing. And so we've really, kind of ridden that wave and kind of seen the importance of that, and have been having a lot of active conversations about how can we deepen our storytelling and really get to a place of driving that real connectivity with consumers.
Michael, are you the champion of this internally, and are you fighting kind of other people from the data sense? Because obviously data creates more efficiencies and some things. So are you the lone champion in this, or do you think collectively the organization has embraced your thinking here?
So I think, I work with a group of marketers who remember a time when there was no big data to really attach yourselves to. And so as we started having these conversations, I think it led us down a path where, you could start to dream and imagine a little bit and take yourself back to that place when you first fell in love with marketing, when you first fell in love with storytelling and advertising, and really, again, capturing the hearts and minds of consumers. And so whereas it wasn't the conversation we started out having initially, especially in a time when there was so much uncertainty and budgets are froze and then they're unfroze and we need to do something. Okay, we'll hold off. Again, the temptation was, if I'm going to spend money, I need to make sure this is driving directly to conversion. And then as we started to see, the behavior of consumers start to shift around a bit, it led us to a place where we could pause and say, hey, wait a minute, there may be actually, this might actually be the right moment for us to really pause and take another look at, again, how we're looking to engage with consumers.
Yeah, and it's important to add too that the data can, for anyone out there, and I'm sure you charge your agencies, whomever, whether it be social or your media or creative, like the platforms have tremendous amounts of data on them, right? So to be pushing on the platforms to give you that information, whether you're aligning with gaming or females or males, they have so much data to focus the content verticals or the influencers. Or Abby, that it's a collection of data and they're not siloed. And a lot of times I think people silo. Did you find that it was somewhat siloed, or do you find that everyone's kind of working together nicely to share that info?
I think it pushed it to be a little bit more of a more complex conversation. But once the conversation started, I think people were all on board, because again, it's about unlocking what this could potentially mean for the business as you move forward. And I think as we started to have those more complex conversations of, I know that we typically were using the data to go do this one specific thing, but what if we tapped into more of that data and let that help us to inform this broader range of activities that we could really go off and go tackle.
Yeah, we've had similar experiences as us at Stream Elements because that all the streamers using our platform lie on top of the APIs of the bigger platforms, Twitch, YouTube, etc. The data we get overall about viewing, types of games and audiences, conversion and stuff, it so feeds into like a lot of the strategies when we work with some of the bigger companies out there, not from just a brand safety, but more specifically like, hey, I want to target dual target moms and kids. And how do I know which games do that? Because it's hard to track. Well, you know that Animal Crossing and Fortnite and all these other games, you know, statistically that you have to dig deeper into the data and show what's trending and then deliver that audience that way. So I think I'd love talk about a little bit of how you applied, right? Your job's twofold, right? So how you applied to the launch of really running the gaming vertical here, and how you took that thinking with content over to an area that obviously was exploding, but can also be scary for a new team getting into it because of the chatter and how loyal that audience is. It's got to be really approached with the deep thought. So talk a little bit about moving over that and applying that strategy over to gaming.
Absolutely. And I think, speaking of deep thought, I mean, this process to enter gaming, began probably 2017, 2018, where we obviously weren't the first people to realize that sound could be important in these gaming platforms, and it's really a marketplace that had existed for roughly 10 years or so before we got onto it, but we actually thought that we were coming in at the right time, because whereas in gaming, the visuals of the game had really evolved very quickly from when I first picked up a controller some number of years ago. The sound had lagged a bit, and so there was not as much energy that had gone into sound design. And being in a company where we work with some of the best sound engineers in the business, like, they need a big challenge to go after. And I think they were waiting for the sound and gaming to really get to a place where they thought that they could layer on some of that special JBL engineering sauce to really bring it to life in the right way. And so we took roughly 2 years to really start to develop that product, or the line of products, and really took the time to talk to consumers, to gamers within the space, and understand what's really important to them when it comes to gaming headsets. And we found out very, very clearly that it's the clarity of the communication, it's the immersive nature of the sound itself, but it's also the comfort. You need to be able to wear them for 6, 8, 10, 12 hours in a day and not feel like your head is being squeezed. And so once we latched on to those things, we developed 7 different products that we hit the market with, which was extremely aggressive, but we felt like we were onto something. We wanted to make sure that we created something at every price point that allowed multiple consumers to really tap into it from wherever they were entering into the space. But then we had to get on to how do we actually introduce this to the masses. And so if we rewind back to the end of 2019, I had the most perfect marketing gaming launch strategy that the world had ever seen. Like, it was.
I'm sure you were hitting up big. I'm sure you were hitting up big experiences like E3.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It was the perfect plan, and we felt like it was going to position us well again to enter into a lot of these spaces where we knew gamers were going to be congregating, and give them the opportunity to really engage with the product in real life, and allow those consumers to really help us to kind of push our story out to their friends and to their gaming teammates, etc. But then a funny thing happened, on the way to me, framing that perfect marketing launch strategy, that really impacted a lot of folks' lives in a bunch of different ways. And so we found ourselves in February, March, with potential deals in hand of things that we were going off to go do that may have not made the same amount of sense at that point. So again, like, looking at what we were ultimately trying to accomplish, which was, can we build and establish quickly credibility within the minds of gamers? How can we do that? And whereas, in a pre-COVID world, we had one set of plans to go off and do that, as the impacts of COVID really became real, we had to quickly adjust and figure out how do we still go into this marketplace, still gain the credibility that we're looking to gather, and launch the product in a way that could lead us to some form of success in this extremely uncertain time. And so we looked at building credibility both with gamers, and so really went out to partner with one of the more preeminent lifestyle and gaming organizations with 100 Thieves, and again, like that deal was structured one way as we sat down to write it, at first, and then as things started to pivot, then we looked at how do we tap into them and their content creation mechanism, and really help to again have them help us to tell that story. And on the flip side, we also were looking at going into esports, and we're having a lot of conversations within that space, and that's also one that was tremendously impacted as the whole idea of getting 5, 10, 15,000 people into a venue to watch some of the best gamers play. It's over. And so with that, we still knew that we needed that element, and working with my gaming agency Petrol, who were amazing in this journey, we were able to frame up our own gaming event, our own esports event, the JBL Quantum Cup at the end of last year, which again was built off of a lot of the same the same insights that we had originally entered into, but just the framing was different, and working through in this world where people still want to connect, and gaming was still a big connection point for a lot of consumers. How could we place ourselves as an enabler for kind of a one of its first of its kind gaming event that allowed us to be seen in the arena that we wanted to be seen in, and gain the credibility that we were ultimately trying to gain within year one.
Huge challenges, right? I listen, I think a lot of people in obviously in the industry, not just in gaming overall, had, whether it was experiential budgets set against live sports, right? Whether it be broadcast or in market live sports activations, right? That scurry there was a universal change, but again, you were so emphasized on content, right? It's easy to change pre-roll and other media, right? But when you've got planned activations and experience and build out and stuff, to all of a sudden change to a complete shift of content online, where you can't necessarily touch and feel it, or hear the sound, right, yourself, then going through those creators. I'd love, why don't you can you give an example of what you're really proud of, whether it would be one creator, one of the activations you did there, to put that into perspective for the content? I think everyone would love to hear it.
Absolutely. And so I mentioned, briefly about the JBL Quantum Cup. And I think the reason why it was something that, we were extremely proud of, again, is because you generally need to be a known entity to get people to care what you're doing in the esports space. And so we knew that we were taking a huge risk looking to jump headfirst into the space, and attaching ourselves to esports and to some of the largest or hottest games within that space, coming in as almost as an unknown. But we had a couple of things at our disposal, and that we had made some friends along the way, as we had sent out products as brands like ours are apt to do around launch time. People had a chance to play with the product and were willing to vouch for it. And so when we came back around with these opportunities, I think there were people who were willing to answer the phone and say, hey, I think you might be onto something quite interesting. Like let's keep the conversations going. And so some of the things that again, conversations we had started earlier that weren't going to pan out in the way that they had originally been framed, were now being reframed for this new purpose. And we were also again able to tap into the guys from 100 Thieves, because they had been such tremendous partners and are obviously a huge name within the space. If we're coming in with the product that the folks who have been exposed to are loving, we're being walked in with an extremely credible partner, who was also willing to roll up their sleeves and help us to build out something of impact. I think it starts to change how we were being looked at as this kind of unknown brand within gaming that was looking to do something fairly substantial. And so from that, we were able to build out essentially a 3-day tournament where we had some of the top teams and some of the top games in Fortnite, Valorant, and PUBG participate across 3 separate global regions. And so we had tournaments in the US, we had tournaments in Europe, and we had tournaments in Asia. And obviously this is all still virtual, but you know, everything was really crafted and built out so that the consumers within those regions were really willing to tune in at a time that was perfect for them, see the players that they were excited about seeing, and enjoy this experience, and ultimately, you know, name a few JBL Quantum Cup champions along the way. And it's funny. The one thing that we were talking about is in terms of building credibility is, how do you know when you started to establish that level of credibility? Like there's no credibility meter that you can just kind of tap into and say like, yesterday we were at a 4 and today we're at a 6. But I can't say that this morning I woke up and was reading through, you know, some of the headlines that get fed to me, and there was, you know, an article that mentioned, you know, a team that I won't mention now, but you know how they were doing some shakeups on the Valorant side, and it's like, yeah, this team, they did fairly well, like they finished, you know, top 4 in the JBL Quantum Cup, but now they're looking to make some evolutions. I'm like, oh snap, like that's my thing. We built that, and now people are quoting it as a moment, you know, in this gaming universe, which is, you know, it's an amazing feeling. But it's also one of those things that like helps you to recognize, you know, when you partner up with the right folks, when you go in with the right mindset, and you're willing to be flexible, in terms of, you know, really, you know, what you're willing to do to hit those goals. Sometimes some magic can be unlocked.
Yeah, it definitely can be unlocked. And, you know, with Thieves, it's a great situation because, and people have to remember, you know, obviously there's a difference between gaming and esports, right? You and I talked a little bit about that yesterday. But ultimately, esports in those arenas, they're packed by fans that are there to see those gamers. And where do they see them normally? Still online, right? It puts you in a special place to be in that experience because they can touch that streamer, so to speak, more. But the everyday communication is online, so it's still natural to go back and form that tournament like you did. It's just about having the partner to quickly do it, assemble it, and activate it there.
Absolutely.
And did you find was the program overall, in this case, obviously you want to drive sales, you would drive the needle. Was there a conversion expectation? Was there a component to that? It was purely more about awareness and recognition in the community to validate who you guys are first and foremost, versus so pushing sales that could turn them off?
Yeah, and that was our mindset going into it. I mean, it happened, you know, during Q4, which is a huge selling season for us. And so, you know, obviously the impetus generally during that window is like, how can we move more product? But we were really careful with this, again, because we knew that whereas if I can impress you or impress upon you my desire to enter into this space in the right way, and that JBL and JBL Quantum was the product, was the brand behind this event that you're experiencing, you know, for this particular weekend. I'm planting that seed, again, going back to that agricultural reference earlier. And so everyone who tuned in wasn't even in the market for a headset. There were a few folks who likely were, and who went to check us out, and we definitely saw, you know, a bit of a bump, you know, while we were live. But I mean, we're looking to play the long game. You can't come in, you know, 10 years late and try to recoup, you know, on that 10 years in the first 8 months of being in the business. And so that, you know, we really were, we really did hold back a bit on trying to be overly aggressive in terms of trying to drive sales, you know, during the event, and really made it the experience that we know that gamers really want to tune in for. And you mentioned it earlier, like these are the folks that they look up to. These are the folks that they try to pattern their own games after. I don't want to interrupt, you know, that engagement and that interaction that they're having with some of their favorite gamers by, you know, continuously just trying to push my brand, or a buy message, you know, down their throat in that moment. And again, like the whole desire is, if you do it right, and you capture their hearts and their minds, they'll come back to you. And I think, you know, the brands who do it right have been able to do that quite efficiently and effectively over the years. And we want to be, you know, seen as one of those brands.
Yeah, you know, and I think it's important because live content allows you to do that more online, right? So like a tournament style, and people always, you know, I think a lot of times when they're looking at content online, they look at YouTube or Instagram and posts that influencers do versus the live component of those platforms and the content made there. It is so different, the communication tactics. to deploy. It's obviously different on the technology end from our standpoint, but from the engagement side, it's phenomenal. But brands are a little scared to be there, right, because of the unknown.
Absolutely.
Yeah, talk about a little bit of, I mean, obviously gaming, you guys had to be in the live space because it's so prevalent online, but I mean, were there any apprehensions internally with that from the live space, education that you had to do? It's and particularly with COVID, everyone's using video more, right? So it's in their mindset. So it should be easier to embrace given what we're doing versus a year ago. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think
challenges.
I think any brand person knows that the whole idea of sitting your brand into a space where you cannot be almost wholly protective of it, it requires a lot of courage to do. And I think when you start talking about gamers and that the universe that they occupy, they have no apprehension whatsoever in letting you know when you have not come correct in their eyes, when you have stepped out of bounds. Like they have no apprehension in terms of like really letting you know that. And so it's one thing to say, hey, I'm going to put my brand in this live space. It's another thing to say I'm going to put my brand in the live space with gamers who are very apt to kind of share their opinions in real time about not just your brand, or the product that you're looking to promote. And in the event as well, right? So if it's not a well-produced event, if the game itself is not not up to par, if the participants are not the ones that they wanted to see, like these are all opinions that will be shared in very real time with you. And so there's a certain nervousness that's wrapped up in an endeavor like that. So yeah, there was absolutely a lot of education that had to happen, myself included. My agency pulling me off of the ledge as I'm watching previous tournaments and tuning into Twitch to kind of see what's going on. It's like, yeah, this is the conversation that happens. And
yeah, it can be a little scary. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Are you really ready for this? And so the thing is, like, yeah, we want to enter into their space, and we want to establish ourselves in the right way. So that means that we have to be where they are, and be willing to open ourselves up to everything that potentially comes with, standing back on the confidence that we have an amazing brand. We're developing and have delivered an amazing product, and now we're hoping to deliver an amazing production, and put the work in to make sure that all three of those things are true going into that.
And mind you put a lot of thought into the development of the product and listen to those people as well, which is a huge step in the process, right? We've done a lot of focus groups with like Western Digital, for example, for hardware products that they've done the same thing. They've come to us and say, hey, let's create focus groups, digital focus groups, so we understand this product. COVID problems, right? You had to do it this way, send them the product, they touch focus groups. And it's really, to get those insights can be life-changing, right? Like you said, comfort.
Absolutely.
These streamers and their audiences will have it on for 8 to 12 hours sometimes. And with COVID, it sounds crazy. And as a parent, I see my own kid at 5 hours a day. But that was key, I think, into your guys' success there.
Absolutely. And you mentioned insights, and I am a huge fan of insights and just engaging with consumers to really understand, what are the things that you can do that really move the needle. And then I know you hit walls sometimes with people saying like, oh, Henry Ford said this about talking to consumers, and Steve Jobs said this about, talking to consumers. And it's like, yeah, I'm not those guys though. Right. I'd love to say that at some point I'd be, a marketing and a manufacturing genius, but that's just not the lot that was assigned to me. And so for the rest of us, we need to look at the data, and make sure that the data is amazing. Having access to great data leads to great insights. Having great insights, can really lead to great kind of creative concepts. Those creative concepts can then lead to great creative. And if you have great creative, then that's really when you can start to form those amazing connections with consumers. But if at any point in that chain you take your eye off of greatness, you let something mediocre slide through, the whole process gets blown up, and you end up with something that's subpar. And I think that's the challenge that we all have as marketers going down that path, is like making sure that we are staying, maniacally focused on, not allowing any garbage into the system, so that what comes out on the back end is something that is going to check off on all of the boxes that we've deemed important.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's crucial to it. I think a point in there that struck me, and I was having a conversation with someone last week, is that, so many times in marketing, we're also focused on our quadrants, our product, and dates we have to achieve, and that messaging, right? And what I think what we've learned in this past year of life is that with the consumer being home so much, it's you need to market to them to their speed.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Right? You need to market to them the way they want to be marketed to now, right? And to rapidly change that in the home when their mindset is something is so different. Mm-hmm. I've had so many clients. I spoke to, I think it was Kohl's about this, even Avocados of America about this, right? It was the notion that it was actually like you did, it was talked about changing the strategy, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we know we have product launches, we know we have to promote this, we know we have to do this, but wait a minute, these people aren't in the same way anymore. So if we're mm-hmm. creating content, I need to listen to how the consumer wants it created, mm-hmm. right? Absolutely. And now with gaming, it makes it a little easier to do that. But it's still the overall message of listening to what the consumer wants, not just like what you guys need internally to hit certain data points or strategic points.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, I'm curious, outside of Twitch, like any other, other platforms for content, TikTok, Reddit, right? I mean, there's obviously all these big, we always focus on the Twitches and the YouTube and Facebook, obviously that's where a lot of media spending goes and stuff. But, I'm curious with TikTok and like Reddit's not obviously live, but, have you guys, not necessarily even in the gaming, but overall looked at those spaces and content across there and how to utilize those platforms differently?
Absolutely. And I think, the other thing that's always going to be core, I think, going along with your message around, hitting consumers where they are, is like consumers won't always be where you expected them to be, especially with technology moving at the rate that it does now. If an agency comes into me presenting me just a television ad, it's like, yeah, we've missed. If you come in presenting me just an idea that's focused on just one digital video or just one quote Facebook post or whatever, you know that you've missed the mark. And so right. One of the things that we for gaming as well as for the broader business push our agencies on consistently is, don't come to me with just a bunch of stuff. Come to me with the thing, like the yep. thing that and show me how that thing comes to life in all of the multiple touch points in which my consumer might be. And if there are places that where my consumer might be that we haven't talked about, that we haven't endeavored to engage with in the past, like that's the other thing that I'm pushing my agencies to do, is help me to identify like these new paths forward, these new places where we could continue to engage. And so both with gaming as well as with our broader portfolio of sound products, looking at every tool that that Facebook releases, every tool that Google releases, looking at TikTok, and not just that people are on it, but how it's being used and how you might be able to, again, join that conversation in a way that does not disrupt the fun and kind of the intent of the channel itself. And again, like, this is not a conversation you can have once a year. This is a conversation you need to have all the time. Exactly. Every time we connect, we need to be talking about how those things are going to happen. So absolutely, Twitch was a new thing for us from a gaming perspective, but in engaging with them, we also recognize like this is also something that we could very easily tap into for music, because consumers are starting to move there to see their favorite DJs, to see their favorite performers perform live. And so even in just having that initial conversation that was based on gaming, it broadened our horizons in terms of what might be possible for the future. And so again, we are always having those conversations and looking at how can we tap into these different platforms and utilize them to do the things that we need them to do, and to engage with consumers in the way that we want to.
Yeah, and I think you had you said something really key there that how consumers are using those platforms changes all the time through the year, right? Absolutely. And it changes by ultimately the content overall messaging. And so, and if anything proves that it's this year, right? We went into the year in a political situation, right? Got into a COVID that then launched different types of, the Black Lives Matter movement was always going on, but it increased it even more with the COVID and the impacts and the racial. So all these things play into content. Absolutely. Right? Yes. It plays into TikTok content of people having music to that, the Fleetwood Mac Dreams video, if you remember, of the guy skateboarding. Right. So it's funny because people think, oh, they're platforms and they're just the audiences, but everything going around in our world plays into it, even down to, I'm sure with you guys with streamers, you launch, well, there's political conversations going on. And when someone's streaming for 4 hours, they're just not talking gaming. Right. Their audience is there talking life too,
Absolutely.
Right? Did you guys, and you must have obviously considered all these things because you lean so heavily into the content, right? Were those conversations happening all throughout?
You have to. And I think it's a part of what comes with seeing these channels as not advertising channels or just opportunities to advertise or push your product. These channels are tools for conversations, and these are conversations that consumers are having all the time. And so, yes, you can be the one that drops in an abrupt ad that stops the conversation so that you can, work this brand message in, or you can find unique ways to join the conversation, or more importantly, sometimes to determine when that's a conversation that you're not adept to be a part of at this point.
At the moment.
Like, no, people are talking about this thing. This thing is way more important than this thing that you're trying to say. Put a pause in that thing that you're trying to say and let this conversation unfold. And if you have something of value to add to that conversation, then do that, but still tread lightly because, in some of these instances, people aren't looking to hear from you. And then a lot of times, if what you're saying is not substantial, then it ends up doing more harm than good. And so I think, again, approaching all of this as these are conversations that are taking place across all of these channels and really making sure that you're figuring out that, if this is the right moment for you to drop in whatever that thing was that you were hoping to share with consumers, and still make sure that you do it in the right way, in the way that is fitting of the channel and the way that the channel is currently being used, not the way that we did it 2, 3, 5 years ago.
Yeah. It's interesting too. And I'll tell you what's great about live is it allows you to change real quickly. Right? When you produce content yourself, or if you're producing within maybe a set of creators, YouTube content, which normally is an 8-week process or longer, right? It's not, you can adapt sometimes that quick, right? And with the live space this year, I mean, I'll tell you 2 instances for us, both in June, Bounty, we were obviously launching a big campaign, and it was the first time doing deep content with gaming. They had done media. You had the height of the pandemic when paper towels aren't even on shelves. Right. They didn't want to cancel because this is the best time to embrace, but how do we do this very lightly in the content and have some more fun with this, right? And lean into this audience, right, with it, which was, and we had to change positioning quick and branding. A client like Nutter Butter, which National Peanut Butter Day was in June, and it fell on like the biggest day of some of the movements, right, happening across the cities. They're like, we're like, look, this is going down. We need to shift. You want a 12-hour activation on Twitch? I called the client. I'm like, we can't do this. This is not the weekend to be fun. We moved it 2 weeks. We changed the messaging. At that point, people needed a little bit of relief, right? There was conversations going on Twitch, but it was about changing the messaging, having fun, and working with the streamers to make sure they announced at the beginning of the broadcast, look, we're gonna have some fun today. We all need a break. And you're able to do that with live, right? And even with live television, you're able to do that. So I don't want to make it about digital or live events to some extent. That's the power of it. And I don't think people necessarily embraced it enough during this time frame. I want to be careful of time. I think we've got around 5 or so minutes left for you and I talking. Talk about 2021 for you, obviously, because we're still faced with just as many challenges, at least probably going through the first half of this year. I mean, how are you going to take the learnings, obviously, from last year and build upon that, right? Because that's got to be your goal now.
Yeah. So I think there are probably, two big things that we're really focused on as we get into 2021. I think the closer one is gaming. And I think now the benefit within gaming is, we're going into a world that is not that dissimilar from the one that we just exited in 2020. And so we know a little bit about how to operate within the space. We'll plan this year as if it will be, loosely, similar to what was happening last year, and let's not, place huge bets on in-person events, et cetera. But again, how do we look to deepen our relationship with gamers? And again, I mentioned earlier that we launched with 7 different products. Now, how do we really deepen even some of the messaging and the communication points around those products to show consumers, how this one is for you. The Quantum 100 is for this consumer. The Quantum 1 is for this other consumer. But we want to rock with you all just the same. So that's how we're approaching it from a gaming perspective. And I think we're really excited about some of the things that we learned and we uncovered in year 1 that we will quickly be able to apply and start to benefit from in year 2 of our existence. And then from a broader JBL perspective.
Let me just ask you one question on that.
Sure.
Because you talked about those tournaments being, I think in 3 different regions. I'm curious, and I should have asked this before, but I'm curious, did you have to approach the content and the messaging different? And obviously you did in each of those regions because of the region, but did the circumstances around the year, COVID, also impact that, right? In that as well. And how did you work with one agency or did you work locally to try to change that content?
So it was one agency, but we have a strong network of regional marketers that really have their finger on the pulse of what's happening within those regions. And so it's working with our agency, but then a lot of, early morning and late night conversations with my counterparts in some of the other corners of the world to say, hey, this is what we're thinking. How might this work with your consumers? Is this something that's going to excite them? Is this the right title? Is this the right messaging? Is this the right path forward? And really allowing them to feedback and help to add to that process. Because it is, slightly different. And even for a year where we were all planning on launching on the same day in April of 2020, the moment that things started to shift, I got Asia picking one launch date. I have, North America picking a different launch date. And then, my friends in Europe, picking a launch date that's even different than that. So they were even at different points in their life cycle as we were approaching, our final event. And so what's going to be required in order for you to hit your consumers where they are and where you are within your life cycle and within your launch plans. And so it was, a lot of engagement with the regions to really make sure we were plowing those learnings in.
Yep. And then, and I'm curious, earned effect from the media from this. Obviously, you talked about you waking up this morning, the other morning, and seeing it. Right? Was there a lot of positive earned media out of it outside of the social chatter overall? Did you guys get that from the program?
Absolutely. And I think it was cool to start to see that unfold. I mean, even the weekend up, you mentioned Reddit earlier. We placed a couple of big bets from a media standpoint on Twitch and IGN. Okay. We didn't engage with Reddit, but by the second day of the tournament, we had a Reddit page that was up that had already been started by consumers, and they were talking in real time about what was happening within the event. And so again, you look for those small kind of notations that credibility is being garnered and gained, and I think that was another one of those instances.
That's a perfect example. A lot of clients are afraid of Reddit to some extent too, but that's a perfect example of a great earned way on a platform that you guys weren't even necessarily positioning. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, excellent. I guess we should. I think we have about 5 to 8 minutes left, so I guess we should ask questions. Although I don't see many questions in the Q&A chat there, so I will throw it out to everyone. If not, you and I will keep on talking. Does anyone have any questions I want to ask Michael or I? No, we don't, Michael. So let's let's keep chatting a bit, unless I think someone from the Brand Innovator side is joining in and might want to cut us off. Martin, we're good?
No, this is not the cutoff, but I mean, you know, we have a minute or two, but
Okay.
you know, Sean, if you had a follow-up question you wanted to ask, certainly have time for that. If you had something else, but if not,
No, I mean, I think we covered it, right? I think Michael's given a great example of them being innovative and, you know, on the foundation of data, but being able to shift. Michael, any last minute thoughts, everyone? We've had a great group of participants listening, I know. So,
No, I'd love to thank you guys for the opportunity to join in today. Thanks to Sean for handling me with care. Yeah, thanks for the folks who did tune in.
We did have a question that just
oh,
came
we did.
up.
Great.
Do you mind? I'll ask it right now. It said that they wanted, Michael, the question was to you, is dive in deeper between your view of esports versus gaming as it relates to marketing to the audience. And
Great question.
Having a 16-year-old who built his own computer and ordered a gaming chair who does gaming, but you know, esports is a whole different ball of wax. So I'll let you take that, Michael.
Yeah, and I think it's you know, very, very loosely, and it's the way that I kind of talk about it inside of our organization is, you know, gaming in a lot of instances is built a lot more around personality. So like that person is very good at a particular title or a set of titles, but they also have kind of the personality to carry a full stream, engage with their followers on an ongoing basis. People tune in to not just see them play, but also hear what they're going to say within that space. Esports is a lot more about a lot like the really like the hardcore kind of best of the best within specific titles, kind of holistic teams that I have really like honed their skill to be the best. And so whereas their content may be a lot more focused on just the game itself and their preparations and getting ready with their teammates to go into these spaces and do battle, I think the way that you would utilize them and how they would engage with your following is going to be slightly different.
Yeah, and for me personally, I mean, even on a personal level, like I've seen the transformation of my children from like, I was freaked out when they were watching people play video games on YouTube, and I'm like, how is that even fun? Like,
yeah, I have a 13-year-old that does it. Yep.
And you just kind of go, I'm not getting it, but then it's been sort of that transformation to like, you know, much bigger in gaming, and I'm a gamer. We have like 3 platforms, but yet my son plays on his computer upstairs. And now you've got esports into that, which is you've got, you know, sponsored teams and all this other stuff. Yes. And getting to that, you know, kind of building off your last sort of statement, like how blown away are you, or, you know, how prepared were you guys for the just excitement and everything that's happened in esports? Like,
it's been tremendous. I think so. I had a brush with gaming in a prior life, you know, working on another brand, but it was probably 6 or 7 years ago. And I remember, you know, agencies coming in to pitch me on the idea of working with gamers and potentially investing in esports. And, you know, the one thing that struck me is having very similar conversations this last go round, those buy-in costs had increased, you know, 10 to 15 fold. Like it was tremendous. But having had a chance to attend some of those events, I mean, you realize like these are extremely rabid, dedicated fans who love not just the game, not just the titles, you know, being presented by the publishers, but love a lot of the esports and the players themselves, and how engaged they are within that platform. And so to garner an audience with them, to get an audience with them, you see why, you know, the price tag has gone up, because I want to wear the headset that my favorite gamer, my favorite player is wearing. I want that same, you know, keyboard. I want that same mouse. I want that exact same setup. And so if you can be a part of that package, it could be tremendously valuable for you.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Sean, I don't know if your son's yet at that stage, but yeah, my son he's got the light up multicolored keyboard. And
yeah. And you know,
it's a host setup.
And what's, you know what, again, and I people fail to, I think a lot of times remember this, particularly young kids in a time of COVID, when they can't go out and play, or they only have 1 or 2 friends in their pod, particularly young males, right? Where else can they go? They're going to go online. They're going to play
100%.
video games. They're going to watch video games, but then they're utilizing the chat right? And their video camera with their friends who they would normally be in school with,
Right.
to play together or to watch together, right?
Yeah.
So, or to watch it, in this case, it might be to watch an esports league or just to watch their favorite streamers. So as parents, I struggle with, after 4 o'clock, my kid's on his set computer for 4 hours, but let's be honest, you can't, that's their only
Right.
way it's their way of socially interacting and at least talking to people live.
Absolutely.
And that's what's key, I think, that advertisers can remember during this time, whether you're gaming or not, is that you've got the opportunity now to have these massively audiences, young or older, that devote more time online to get them in a captured way that you've never seen before.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, guys, definitely out of time now.
Thank you.
But thanks so much, Michael, Sean. It was a great session and eye-opening for sure. So thanks so much.
Take care. Thank you,
having me.
everyone. Stay safe.
Take care.
Bye, Michael.
Bye.
All right, bye, guys. So we're going to head on to our last session of the day. Thanks everybody for being with us. I know it's been a long day, but been super informative. Been great listening to all these great brand marketers and how they're approaching their efforts. I want to welcome Michael Modametti, who's Chief Marketing Officer at Rabbit Hole. Love the brand. And Chris Anthony from who's SVP Brand Partnerships at Group 9 Media. So Michael and Chris, I'll let you guys take it from here.
Thanks, Martin. I appreciate it.
Yeah, not a problem. I think we're it looks like we're waiting for Chris here. He'll pop on in a second, I'm sure. Chris, if you want to turn your video on, there he is. Michael, do you have the dual glasses going on there?
Well, yeah, here you go.
Oh, mine just gradually tint. They're not as cool as that. I love those. Exactly. Anyway, guys, listen, looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael, happy Friday.
Hey, Chris, happy Friday. Little cheers.
Yes.
A little whiskey. You have any you want to share with me?
I know. I should have came prepared.
Yeah, honestly.
I know.
How are you?
I'm good. Short, but feels like the longest week, right? But I'm glad that we're ending on this note, talking about whiskey. Like, what better way to end the week?
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I'll jump right in. Obviously we spent some time this week, and so I'm excited to kind of dig into some more of that conversation and have everyone joining us, hear more about everything you're doing. So yeah, I'd love for you to kick things off and just kind of share a little bit about Rabbit Hole. Don't leave any details out because I think the story that you told me was pretty amazing. I think I repeated already maybe to 3 different people. So give me the background on how you got there and what everyone should know about Rabbit Hole before we jump into some specific questions.
Yeah, for sure, man. Thank you for having me. I really, really appreciate it. I think the story that you're alluding to is kind of how I got involved. The founder of Rabbit Hole is my cousin, Kaveh Zamanian. Brilliant guy. And I had never met him before. And I was living in Toronto at the time, a serial entrepreneur, always on the marketing side of things. And I had the opportunity to go on MasterChef Canada, and I was a top 5 finalist on there. And I guess this is how the story goes. When it was being syndicated in the US, he had seen it with his family, and he was watching it with his family, and he's like, holy shit, that's my cousin over there. And I guess he kind of just fell in love with the aesthetic and just what was being shown on TV. And so he shot me a Facebook message, and I was like, who's this guy? I never met him before. And so ended up calling him, and he basically said, hey, listen, I'd love for you to come and check out what I'm doing. I'm doing something really special. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm starting a whiskey brand. This is about 4 or 5 years ago at this point. I said, man, you are batshit nuts. I apologize. I don't know if I'm allowed to curse. And so from there, he's like, just come out and check out what I'm doing. So I ended up coming out there. It's coming out to Louisville, which is where I'm at right now. And I just fell in love with his vision. I really fell in love with his vision. I fell in love with his dream. I fell in love with how he was really taking this brand and his vision for how to take this brand to market. And I feel like I could be a really, really big asset. I think whiskey in general is a very legacy-oriented industry, right? There was room for disruption. And what a better way with a brand named Rabbit Hole. And so basically, he founded it in 2012. It took some time to kind of get us to market, because one of the big things that we did at Rabbit Hole from day one, which was huge at the time and still very big, in our industry, there's a lot of purchasing of liquid, other people's liquid, and placing it in bottles and calling it their own, right? Now, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just letting you know that that's kind of what the norm is for the usual, because as you can imagine, it's a big, big bet to lay down your own whiskey prior to even knowing if it's going to be a success. And so he didn't want to do that. He wanted it to be his recipes from day one. And it was an uphill battle to be able to go find a distillery at that time, now 7-8 years ago, that will be able to contract distill our recipes, right? His recipes. And so think about it at that time, nothing's going on. There's really no brand. He knows where he's going. We like to look at it kind of like a book. We know where it starts and where it ends. How do we fill in that middle to kind of get to our end goal? And that was a good $8 to $10 million bet on whiskey, not knowing what it's going to taste like. And so, I mean, a lot of this stuff was really what kind of made me go down my own rabbit hole and fall in love with this dream and understand that, spirits has such a special space in my heart. If I could be a part of this and if we could build a legacy on something so grand and special, my God, what could we do? So fast forward in a nutshell, we started selling in 2017, was basically our first bottle ever sold. Really real quick, real slow roll, 2 to 3 markets, regional markets. Fast forward 1 year later, our distillery was built. We opened on Derby in 2018. It's about the 15th, 16th largest bourbon distillery in the world. It was just dubbed the architectural icon of the distillery trail. And fast forward a year later, we ended up partnering with a really great group called Pernod Ricard. The big reasons why we decided to partner with such an amazing group was not only because we loved their culture, but there was a real intimacy about it. We ended up befriending the CEO and the family owner of actual Pernod Ricard out in Paris, and we really fell in love with what they were trying to do. But most importantly, it wasn't an acquisition. It was a partnership, right? And so they purchased all of our initial shareholders, and Kaveh and myself kept our shares in the company, and we're completely autonomous in the sense of how we want to run this brand and keep it in family.
Love that. I think such a fascinating story. I mean, I think if anything, I'm going to start returning phone calls to my family members because maybe they'll have an opportunity like that. But yeah, such an interesting story. I mean, I think we talked a little about this earlier in the week, just about, building a brand and sort of what you're doing. Obviously, you guys put so much effort into the product side of things and such a big investment in that story, obviously. And I think that clearly stood for something. You made a big move. You're connected from a family standpoint. How do you think the whole standing for something, which is incredibly important in younger generations today, plays a role in sort of the marketing and beyond just the product and what you're doing at Rabbit Hole?
That's a really, really great question, Chris. I mean, more and more are consumers looking to brands for advice and for understanding, more so than even politicians, I would say at this point, with the standing for something is extremely important, and following through with what you stand for is just as important. Mm-hmm. You see a lot of brands out there that will say things and not necessarily follow through on it, right? It's more of a propaganda or some sort of kind of political correctness. Here at Rabbit Hole, we believe in very core to the bone kind of beliefs and what we stand for. I mean, innovation, transparency, and authenticity are extremely important to us. Mm-hmm. And we also believe that everybody has the opportunity to follow their dreams, the same way that Kaveh did, or the same way that I did. Mm-hmm. And we try to instill that not only in our internal company and with our employees and our teams, but also portray that to a consumer basis as well too. Don't shy away from what you stand for. I think that's the biggest advice I can give to any brand in this day and age, right? You start waffling one way or another, you're dead, right? And not necessarily what you're going to say is going to resonate with everyone. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. And that's a hard thing to really hold on to and sleep well at night, because You want everybody to love your brand.
Mhm.
But sometimes to win and to be successful and to be authentic in who you are and what you believe in, some people aren't going to like you. And that's
Right.
okay.
Totally. And you talked a lot about, becoming a media company as a long-term goal and being a bigger storyteller for the brand. But even just talking about standing for something and sort of being your own lane and carving that out in a really legacy-driven category, were there brands that were either in the category or just brands that you fell in love with, or publishers or people that you feel like are getting it right, that sort of helped inspire the story of, staying really true to your mission and doing what you guys were doing? Were there brands that sort of gave you guys that confidence or kind of taking a page out of anyone's playbook that's worth talking about?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's so many out there, even our industry and out of our industry. But I think it's important for this conversation, Chris, to really understand the ethos behind what we believe in this marketing group over here at Rabbit Hole. We pull a lot of inspiration from outside of the industry. You know, one of the gaps that we saw in the market was that this is, like you said, such a legacy industry.
Yeah.
And a lot of times what happens with these industries like this and brands like this is that it's very insular. It's very kind of the inside looking in. And we were coming from the outside. We had never been in the spirits industry. None of us had been, right? And so we thought we'd bring something special. I mean, one brand that we always think about, and it's always in the back of our mind, I think a lot of brands should, is Apple, right? I mean, it's an obvious choice, but I think it's important to note. I mean, you saw what Steve Jobs would do. You'd see that he stood for what he believed in. You saw when he stood so much for what he believed in, they ousted him, but he stood steady and they brought him back, right? And inevitably, we saw the success of what Apple became because of that, because of what he stood for, and because of how important he knew that sometimes, just sometimes, the consumer might not know exactly what they want, right? And we need to be, as brands in whatever industry you're in, ahead of the curve, right? And I think that's why it's really important for Rabbit Hole to communicate with the creatives of the world, with the artists of the world. We were talking about this the other day. I don't feel like a lot of brands are giving voices to the artists, to the creatives, right? And there's a lot of this natural kind of progression into sports or into big time movies or race cars or extreme sports, but who's talking on behalf of the people who are doing amazing artwork like this, like Jeremy Booth, who's a local artist over here who does fantastic work. We partner with individuals like this in all different regards, whether that's through content or whether that's through actual art pieces or bottle design, because we're true believers. And I take this from Kaveh, who's a big art buff. I'm slowly kind of getting into it, but artists are the one who know, they're ahead of the game, right? They are the trendsetters. They know what's going to happen before us layman's over here, like myself, really do. So to hone into that voice and to respect it and to give a platform to these individuals, I think is extremely important for Rabbit Hole.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And definitely it feels like an untapped influencer audience that you guys are going after. In that vein, kind of staying with the customer, obviously, 2020 changed the world from a cultural standpoint, in a good way, and or hopefully, continues to kind of go down that path. How do you feel like Rabbit Hole has been sort of addressing, a more diverse customer? And again, kind of going back to like the legacy world of spirits. How are you guys navigating that, in the world that we're in today?
I think, again, phenomenal question. But let's be honest, whiskey in general is predominantly and has always been a very white male-centric industry, and spirit in that case. Times are changing. Times are changing big times. And we saw the tea leaves from day one coming into this business and understanding at that time, I think 30 to 35% of all whiskey drinkers were women. It's increased since then, right? You're seeing a lot of African Americans come into the whiskey industry. You're seeing a lot of immigrants coming into the bourbon category that might necessarily have predominantly been in Scotch, for example. Like my father, for example, it's been a hard trek to convince him that bourbon, we're biased, is a more superior product. But again, that stems back to also what we stand for. As I said, we believe in allowing and wanting and influencing people to follow their dreams and creating their own destiny. Well, let's be honest, following your dreams has nothing to do with race, has nothing to do with sex, gender. And so we're all about inclusivity. And we need to make sure that we brand in that way as well too. And it sounds superficial, but it needs to be shown in our collateral. It can't just be something that we talk about. We need to highlight Black chefs. We need to highlight immigrant chefs. We need to highlight, we did a great series on chefs, so I'm just going on that. We need to highlight women chefs and allow the individual and the consumer to know that we can relate to them, that there is someone over here that is their voice, right? I think there's three things that we always talk about here, and we scream it from the top of our lungs: entertain, elevate, and educate. If we can hit those three things, we've hit gold.
Right. No, that's great. I think to that point too, obviously it sounds like you guys are, really thinking about everybody from a customer standpoint. Even your father sounds like might be the hardest customer to acquire. But in that vein, there's obviously a ton of choice from a medium perspective. And we talked about this too in our conversation around like attention being a big metric for you. And when you start to think about the platforms that you're using to tell the stories, I know we're going to get to some of the work you have done from a deeper storytelling standpoint, but how do you think about different platforms and different channels to really keep the attention of these either existing consumers or future consumers, knowing that there's so much out there? It's like, what's the next TikTok or what's going to be the next X? And thinking about where to focus from a platform or content. So yeah, we'd love to talk to you about just kind of attention overall and how you're working with that metric.
Yeah, so I think it's twofold, right, Chris? One is big philosophy of mine and our team is that we don't look at social media platforms as marketing platforms. They're conversation platforms. They give us the ability to converse with our consumers in a real intimate way. The day and age of the TV ad being blanketed across the country and hoping to God that someone is going to interact with it at the shelf is long gone, right? We have the ability through social platforms to have real conversations with humans that are interested in our brand, right? And that's why every digital marketer in the world is screaming from the top of their lungs how important engagement is, right? Impressions are great for brand awareness, but that engagement, we do a lot of correlation studies and are really kind of understanding what the impact is on shares versus likes versus comments versus commenting and then responding, and how we get that consumer to go and experience our brand. They want to feel valued and they should be valued, right? Who do we value the most? We value the consumer the most, obviously, right? And so I think that's really important, no matter what platform it is, to really understand that it's really about conversation. It's not about just throwing things at the wall and hoping that it sticks. You have to make sure that when you're testing your digital ads, that they're actually building conversation. It's not just about how many views, how many did God. It's about how many individuals did you get to go to your store locator, in our case. Then talking about a specific platform, listen, understanding the demographics of the specific platform, in my opinion, is by far one of the most important things that any marketer has to think about in this day and age, right? The person that's on Facebook, who's probably my mom and my dad, and the person who's on Instagram, who's probably my cousin and my buddy, and the woman or the guy who's on TikTok is the person who we probably are trying to get to try whiskey, right? And so understanding those demographics and age ranges and who's using it and how they're using it is extremely important in understanding what content should go through what platforms, right? That's the beauty of marketing, right? We get to decide where and how and when we want to place this content in front of the individual, right? We're doing a lot of studies right now on demand spaces. And the idea is, how do you stop the consumer prior to making the decision to purchase, during the occasion that they want to purchase, to grab rabbit hole, right? Another big thing when we're talking about social platforms is research tells us that 90% of don't quote me on the 90%, but a lot of the percent of individuals that are shopping in the store, specifically in our industry, specifically at our price level, is making the decision before they even walk into the store, right? At the comfort of their own home, researching, conversing, talking, watching videos, and then leaving the home to go and purchase for a particular product, right? We're $49 to $79 is our core range. That's an expensive product, right? It's a super premium category. And we, as marketers, need to understand that the consumer needs to make a decision whether they want to be vested in us or not. And we need to do the best job that we can to not only stand for who we are and what we believe in, but also make sure that we value the consumer in the right platform at the right time.
Totally, that makes a ton of sense. And to that point, obviously, understanding who that customer is, you know, the different platforms, and a lot of you talked about going beyond just the ad and really creating something valuable. That kind of gets to the next point around, you obviously took that to another level and invested in a whole film series. There's no going back, which is, you know, sounds super, you know, out there for a brand to invest in such an interesting way. And the story you were telling me sounds like that's such a big commitment to your consumers, of how you're really caring about the storytelling side of the business. So expand a little bit more on that, of how, you know, what that strategy has done to help you sort of understand the future of new consumers, or sort of giving that type of content to the existing consumers.
I mean, literally, this fireside chat is not long enough for me to talk about content. I'm content. I'm screaming it from the moment I walk into the office to the moment I walk out. Yeah. You know, I was telling you the other day, and I'm a big believer, you know, and I might be wrong. Don't get me wrong. And, you know, I'll take the I told you so's if it happens. But I am a true believer that large format, huge campaigns are a thing of the past. Mm-hmm. Spending hundreds of millions of dollars on one or two scenes of content, 25 images of content, to me sounds a little bit dated. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's as easy as just looking in the mirror, Chris, right? How much content do I digest on an everyday basis, right? How much content do you digest, right? How many TikToks do people go through? How many Instagram scrolls do they go through? How many YouTube videos do they go through? How much TV do they watch? I mean, it's just astronomical. We're digesting content at an astronomical rate right now. Mm-hmm. And so we're hitting a big bet on content and great storytelling and very, very high quality stuff. Some stuff that's easily digestible, some stuff that you need to really watch a full-blown series, such as the There's No Going Back series. Mm-hmm. There's No Going Back is our tagline, which really stands for, once you follow your dreams, once you find your passion, there's no going back to that old life. And it really stems from our founder. He was a psychologist and psychoanalyst for 20 plus years. And he decided that he was going to follow his dream and become a whiskey maker after 20 years of being a psychologist. I mean, we laugh about it, but you know, his wife's knocking on wood that he wasn't buying a Porsche for a midlife crisis, right? But so I started thinking, and we started thinking, like, there's so many individuals out there from all There's No Going Back feeling. And we wanted to tell their stories in a really, really intimate way. And we wanted to take it really a step further. We wanted Kaveh, who's a psychologist, to be the one who actually does the interview with these people. So we found a hatter, Gunnar Fox. We found a musician, Alison Mossart from The Kills wanted to be involved. We found, you know, Stephen Ken was a furniture maker. We found Che Rhodes from Louisville, who's a glass blower. And we sat down with them, and Kaveh did a really amazing interview. And it wasn't just about, hey, what are you making next? Or, hey, when's your next show? It was really about, you know, what were the things in your life that influenced you to be able for you to have There's No Going Back moment, to go down that rabbit hole of your own. And the reason why we wanted to pick people from all walks of life is, again, that go back to what we were talking about earlier. We want to relate to a number of different individuals, right? Spirits is a real life, is the epitome of a lifestyle brand. It's there when you're happy, it's there when you're sad. And if we can show individuals and communicate with individuals from all walks of life, no matter race, gender, occupation, doesn't matter what it is, then we've really done our job. Now, the investment that you're talking about was really awesome, because they actually when I pitched this idea to a friend of mine in LA, Dilly Gent, an amazing producer, she called me literally 24 hours later. She said, "Are you sitting down?" I said, "Yeah, I'm always sitting down." And she goes, "Well, guess what? Giovanni Ribisi wants to direct your films, your miniseries." I said, "You got to effing kidding me. Like, this is like 2016, 17. Like, we've probably sold 5 bottles, okay?" I'm like, "There's no way we can afford this. What are you talking about?" She's like, "Listen, he's fallen in love with the project and he really wants to kind of help out. Let's just figure out some way to make it work." And I said, "Absolutely." You know, fast forward 2-3 months later, we flew out to LA. We filmed in Stellascope, his own studio out there. What a phenomenal guy, by the way. And we actually ended up, through this process, deciding to close the series out with Kaveh actually being in front of the camera to really hear the rabbit hole story and why all these individuals connect with each other. And again, to put it on steroids, his wife's a psychologist. She's the one who ended up interviewing him.
So wild. I love it. I feel like all these phone calls you keep getting, it's like, that's the ticket. Talk about just, you know, obviously content storytelling, you know, is something that you guys are excited about, but innovation, just around, you know, the distillery itself and the product. How curious is the customer about knowing about those types of things? And how transparent are you guys about like really helping show those types of things around the product and using that in the marketing? Obviously, you just talked about a really deep story and highlighting talent, but how much does the actual product itself kind of play into kind of a look under the hood? And are people really curious about that?
Okay, so first of all, they're so curious.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely amazing. It's a joy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to backtrack a little bit because sometimes the marketing gets a little bit out of hand and gets kind of first billing. You have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of time and effort that goes into the liquid, that goes into the recipes, that goes into the curation of the barrels, that goes into the timing of the aging, that goes into the tasting, to make sure that whatever is inside of that bottle is the best possible drink that we can produce, right? It's important to say that because sometimes as marketers, it becomes a lot of glitz and glam, right? And in reality, what really, really matters is what's in the bottle, right? And so the distillery that we built is really a testament to that. It's not only state of the art, but it's extremely transparent. I would hope for you to come and visit one day. The way it's designed is that as if you walk through it, you get an actual experience where you can see every step of the process from soup to nuts. You actually see the grains flowing through the distillery from one side to the other side. You see the barrels being dumped. You see the barrels being filled. You see the bottling being bottled. You see the cooker cooking the grains. You see the grains going from the cooker to the fermentation. Everything is in plain sight. We actually do have an innovation lab, and it's a sensory lab that usually is somewhere tucked away in a basement somewhere, right? Ours is literally wide open with a beautiful glass in front of it. So you can see, sometimes if you're lucky enough, you'll see Kaveh or myself in there tasting whiskey real right there and then to see if it's ready to go into the bottle. So it's awesome to see the interest of the consumer. It's awesome to see how interested people are. And, you know, we touched a little bit on the virtual tours as well, too. So that's something that we're getting into.
Yeah, I would love to talk more about that because I think you just described an experience that sounds amazing to me because like everybody is desperate to travel and do something fun in the world we're living in now. So I'll add that to my list. But talk about how clearly all of that stuff sounds amazing, the distillery and the experience. But, you know, we're in a world right now where in real life experiences is challenging. Talk about how COVID sort of shook all that up. What have you guys done to sort of still tell that story that you just so eloquently talked about what the in real life experience looks like, but how did you kind of get the consumers to understand that in the world we're all living now at home?
Yeah, I mean, we live in some crazy times, man. I mean, this is like, we are gonna like look back and like, I don't have any kids, but if I have kids, will look back and be like, there was a time where we were wearing masks and you couldn't even touch people. And they're probably going to be like, Dad, we still don't touch people. So I don't know what's going to happen. Hopefully that's not the case. But
Can't wait till we tell that story to somebody.
Yeah, exactly.
Remember back when.
But March is when it really started to get going. End of March, beginning of April, we all looked at each other and we knew that we needed to do something drastic. And we put a little committee together in the marketing team and the sales team, and we put together what we called a virtual pivot plan, right? Everything was going virtual and we needed to be ahead of the game. And we really, really needed to make sure that not only were we able to still kind of converse with our consumers and interact with our consumers, but we needed to do it in a very unique way and in a way where their attention spans were not lost, right? And so we put together we were just whiteboarding like crazy, like throwing everything at the wall. Like what's going to go into this pivot plan? What do we need to do? And so we ended up doing, like, in the beginning, first 3-4 months, we were doing a different live segment on Instagram every single day. We were interviewing chefs for the James Beard Foundation. We're actually the official bourbon and American whiskey of the James Beard Foundation, Taste America. Food is really, really important to us. And so a couple of the really, really big ones that stood out that we knew I felt actually instinctually that it was going to last far past COVID, that ended up still being the most successful was the virtual tours and tastings. So not only did we do it on Instagram Live, but then we took it another level as well too. Like there's some e-commerce sites out there, like Caskers, for example, where they have a Reserve Bar, where they have packages with our product. You can buy 3 or 4 bottles, and you get an email from us directly, and we set you up with one of a real tour guide that will go through a tour and a tasting with you. And we even took it so far as even doing with holiday packages out there, where if you buy it, it wasn't even mandatory. You didn't even need to buy anything. You would just sign up for a tasting and a tour. And if you happen to have Rabbit Hole, great. And if you happen to not, who cares? Mm-hmm. We just wanted people to interact with us. Mm-hmm. Another really cool thing that came out of the pandemic and quarantine was we needed a way, like I said, I keep talking about this conversing with the consumer, but we needed a direct connection with our consumer, and we needed it with Kaveh, our founder, right? We wanted people to hear his voice. We wanted him to hear his opinion. Who is he talking about? Who is he interacting with? And so we did an Instagram Live segment called Kaveh's Bourbon Bunker. Yes, he has a bourbon bunker in his house. He's one of those special guys out there that we're jealous of out here. And so that became a huge success. It was every Saturday at 3:00. And it was interesting. You could see as people were getting sick of the quarantine, 3, 4, 5, 6 months in, that numbers would go lower and the numbers would go higher and the numbers would go lower. So you would see that people were staying home or not staying home just through that little interaction that we were having on our Instagram Live. I mean, that was such a success that we're actually transitioning. That's IG Live now is ending, and we're transitioning him into a full-blown podcast.
That's great.
That's another thing that kind of outlasted. And then I think one thing that really, really was kind of game changer in our industry, I don't know about other industries as much, but in our industry, we have a lot of ambassadors, sales ambassadors that go into stores and I'm sorry, frozen, or do you hear me?
I can hear you.
And yeah, we have sales ambassadors that go and like make sure we have relationships with bartenders or liquor stores or whatever it may be. We developed a role. It was called the digital. And his full sole job was to just interact with, whether it was trade or with consumers or whoever, whether it was on Reddit. I was hearing Michael on the last fireside, and really garnering and having a Rabbit Hole real life person presence, not a brand presence, a person presence that was going through these different social channels and interacting on a real level. I mean, they were saying, "Hey, what's up, Adam? How's it going, Adam?" It wasn't like, "Hey, Rabbit Hole robot man, like who's behind this," right? And it was such a success that we actually hired another digital ambassador. I mean, COVID has, as horrible as it's been, it's changed life forever. And as marketers and as brand owners, we really just need to own it. I mean, there's nothing we can do, right? I mean, times have changed, and some things are never going to come back,
Yeah.
right?
I love that. It's interesting because it's like in one vein, on the one side of the spectrum, you're doing, film series directed by Hollywood major talent, and then you're doing this more raw IG content too. So I love that it's kind of both ends of the spectrum. Super interesting stuff on that front. Last question, I guess, what's next for you guys? Speed ahead, we're out of the pandemic. What does life look like for the brand from a marketing standpoint and a product standpoint?
Whoa. Definitely we're excited. I mean, I was talking to Chris Moon, COO of James Beard Foundation earlier today, and I was just like, listen, I just want to give someone a hug, but that's outside of outside of Rabbit Hole and what's next. But from Rabbit Hole standpoint, innovation is going to be a big key point. Not innovation on marketing, not innovation on virtual tours, innovation from a product standpoint. We have a lot of really amazing products in the pipe that are going to come out, that are going to be special editions, and they're going to be one-offs, and you got to grab it. And if you grab it, you got it. And these are going to be really great collectibles. And innovation from the product standpoint, I mean, different barrels, different finishes, different recipes. I mean, just fantastic spirits, right? To really hone in on that idea of craft and boutique, right? We're not this big conglomerate running around like a big kind of liner in the middle of the sea that can't stop. We're nimble. We're able to move. We're able to create. And that's core to what Rabbit Hole is. So we're really excited to be coming out with some of these releases that are going to come out soon. We're also really excited to open back up our distillery for tours. I mean, this is literally, the Napa Valley of bourbon, right? It's been empty. We're missing people. We want people to come. We want people to visit. And every day I get a call, are you open? Are you open? So we're really looking forward to that as well. And then this is obviously a marketing fireside chat. What we're also really excited about is that next year, our fiscal is June to June. So really soon, in about 6 months, we are going to amplify our content to a place that I don't think anybody on my team is ready for, and I don't think the consumers are ready for. If people think that we've been making content now on a regular basis, we are looking probably to estimate somewhere around 150 to 200 pieces of original 1 to 2 minute pieces of content on a 12-month basis. That's literally about one piece of new content, not including images, not including, quick little vignettes or whatever it may be. Like, we're talking real storytelling, BuzzFeed style, Red Bull style, like big group, Netflix style content that's going to come out maybe once every 2 days. So we're really excited. Those contents are going to be divided into different verticals. And I can't say too much more, but it's going to be awesome. And we're going to bring in people like the James Beard Foundation. We're going to bring people in like from all walks of life to be able to sit down and tell their stories. People like Jeremy Booth or people like Stephen Ken or whoever they may be. And I don't know if it's politically correct or not, but I think someone's got to be the voice of the creative class. I think there's a creative class out there that is just being undermined, and arts are really the language of human beings. It's literally, and we need to appreciate that.
That's exciting. Awesome.
Hey guys.
Hello. Hey Martin.
Great session. What a great way to end the session on a Friday afternoon talking about whiskey and bourbon, and or I should say bourbon, excuse me, and really, I love the branding of Rabbit Hole. I thought the story, Michael, was fantastic. I love the virtual tours and so forth. And maybe I missed it, but from the Gianni Ribisi story, did he ever end up making the film? I didn't. Maybe I missed that part.
Yeah, we have. We just literally went through it. It launched in November, and basically we closed it up. The last series, we were releasing one series every 2 weeks. Or one series every week, and it ended in January. All of them are on YouTube. I think we garnered somewhere around 10 million views across all channels. It was absolutely phenomenal. That's awesome. It was a big homage to one of my favorite photographers in the world, Richard Avedon. So the whole thing is filmed in this beautiful, stark black and white. And Giovanni just did an amazing job of just getting real tight and real close so that you can actually see when someone's facial reactions and what they felt on the inside. So I really urge you to go check it out.
Yeah, no, I definitely am. I'm a huge Giovanni Ribisi fan, so definitely will do that. And like I said, if anybody has any questions, somebody had put a question in earlier in the chats, and I just lost that. So if you can you read it? Oh, that'd be great. Thanks, Chris.
This is Michael. This is around you likening the bourbon to wine that they've read
Yes,
about.
that's what it was. That's what it was.
I think what he's getting to is, and I've said this. I say a lot of things. My wife wants to kill me. I repeat a lot of things. So
you know what I think we all do, by the way, because my wife always tells me the same thing. So
until it gets done, I will not stop screaming it. Okay. And one big thing that I'm a big advocate for, and Kava is as well, is that we can, as people, treat bourbon the same way we treat wine, right? A big conversation that Kaveh and myself have all the time is that when you go to a restaurant and you order wine, what do? What sort of mood are you in? And what are you going to eat for food, right? Is it going to be a red? Is it going to be a Pinot? Is it going to be a Cab? What is it going to be, right? But when you go to a restaurant and you order whiskey, you order by the brand. That's a very interesting thing to think about, right? Each whiskey has a different spice level, sweet level, char level. I mean, there's different ways to pair bourbon. And so that's one of the big reasons why we aligned with the James Beard Foundation. And when you go to these Taste America events, which are absolutely amazing, there's a virtual one coming up on March 21st. I urge you to sign up. It's 10 cities across the country, 2,000 people coming together. We have whiskey being served at all these events.
I know I always find it interesting. A lot of my friends that try, drink whiskey, that they have a specific brand that they like.
Yeah.
And so you're right. It really is like a wine in that respect, and that there's this affinity towards a particular taste and texture and all of that.
That's exactly why Cabo, and we wanted to make sure that we have 4 different SKUs with completely different flavor profiles. Right? I mean, we have 2 bourbons in the mix. They have completely different flavor profiles. We have a rye that's a little bit spicier. We have a bourbon that's finished in Pedro Jimenez sherry cask. I mean, we go to Spain, we pick the barrels, we bring them back, we age the bourbon in them. Awesome video on that as well called Derringer from Spain to Kentucky. I urge you to go watch that as well too. You're definitely going to buy a bottle if you watch that video.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, guys. Really, what a great way to wrap up the day and a Friday afternoon, like I said. So thanks so much. I just wanted to thank everyone for participating and for everybody joining us today. Like I said, just a great day of programming. We hope everybody will join Brand Innovators on Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern time for an afternoon of programming on the future of TV with our friends at LiveRamp. We'll be joined. We'll be joined by marketing leaders from Cadillac, Northwestern Mutual, ComScore, and more. And so with that, I bid everybody adieu and a great weekend. And Michael, I hope you get a chance to give some hugs soon. I know I know you joked about it, but I'm sure if you're a hugger, I'm sure it's hard.
The problem is most people see that picture you guys got of me. They don't want to hug me. They're scared of me. I don't know what's going on.
All right, guys. We'll have a great weekend. Thanks so much.
Thank you guys so much. Chris, I appreciate it. Martin, I appreciate it. Have a great day.
No worries, Michael. Thanks. Bye. Bye, Chris.
Bye.